Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Stephanie Bree. I know it's been a while. I've been going through a lot of medical procedures and surgeries and colonoscopies and everything, so my body's been in recovery mode for the last couple of months, but I'm finally feeling better and a little more energized, so I'm going to start making videos again, hopefully soon, starting today. And today, as the title implies, I want to give a deep dive into my personal history with Nintendo and set the record straight on some of the misconceptions regarding people's thoughts regarding my views on the company. And this is partially because during my, let me move this over here. Some of my, video game reviews and a lot of my tweets whenever Nintendo, does something shitty, I'm extra hard on Nintendo. But I want to be very upfront. I don't hate the company. In fact, let me see if I can fix my hair a little bit. I actually like Nintendo in general, or rather I should say Nintendo games. Their consoles, however, especially starting with the Wii, but even the N64 and a little bit on the GameCube, are where I have had some issues. And I know I've made a very strong advocacy for Sega is better than people think, and I really get frustrated with how people shit on Sega. But we're not talking about Sega today. I'm going to do a separate video on them, and maybe PlayStation and Xbox and Atari, because those are the four big ones that are still pseudo-relevant today. Or should I say five? Well, four others besides Nintendo. Who did make consoles that don't anymore, some of them, but still make games. Let's talk about Nintendo. I'm old. In a few days, I'm going to be 43. So I was around, obviously not at this very start of Nintendo, because they were founded back in the 1800s. We know this. You don't have to be a keyboard warrior. I know somebody is going to be like, well, actually, you don't need to do that. I know that I'm not that fucking old, goddammit. And I wasn't around in the 70s when they actually started making their first attempts at video games. You know, their early Pongs and things. But I was born in 1982. So I was a toddler when the NES came on the scene. And I was a, 5-6-year-old child going into grade school when the Nintendo, as we called it back in the day, the Nintendo Entertainment System, not NES. And if you say NES in my presence, I'm done with you, and I might actually punch you in the face. So don't do it. That irritates me more than anything, because nobody on the planet Earth ever called it the NES until like 7 or 8 years ago. Some dumbass British YouTuber who shall be unnamed started doing it. Fuckwad. And then everybody followed, because I guess that asshole got popular. So, no, nobody ever called it that. It was the Nintendo. Some people called it the NES, like they did in the commercials, or the Nintendo Entertainment System if you were formal. Or just the regular Nintendo once the Super Nintendo came on the scene. Or the classic Nintendo once the N64 and GameCube came on the scene. So I was there not day one on the NES. In fact, I didn't get my NES until 1988. Christmas 1988. But even though that was, I'm going to say 2 years into the NES, because even though it technically launched in December or November, October, Christmas, fall season of 1985, that was only in select markets in major cities. That was the test market. The wide launch, where people like myself living in nowhere, Kansas, would have had access to one, didn't happen until 1986. So when people get all hung up on the NES came out in '85, I mean, yeah, technically, but no, it didn't. Only if you lived in one of the 5 major cities that it released in. If you lived anywhere else, it didn't exist. So shut the fuck up. I get sick and tired of people on that. And this isn't going to be another one of those, you're wrong, about what in the hell is that? I can't find it. There's something. There we go. Anyways, this isn't going to be another one of those, you're wrong about the video game crash. It happened, but I've already done a whole deep dive on. It's been overblown. I was fucking 5 or 6 at the time the NES was coming on the scene and building up. So I would have had no knowledge of the so-called crash. As a kid in the 80s, I remember going to Kmart and Sears and, you know, other electronics and retail stores at the time and seeing Atari and Coleco and all these other systems for sale. So, and my cousins had an Atari 7800. They got that, poor souls, instead of an NES. I'm so sorry, dear cousins. You had to endure that. Uncle, what's his name? I'm not going to blow him up here. He was kind of a jerk. It's not his fault. He didn't know any better. I didn't get my NES until 1988. Why? Because they were coming down in price at that point. So there was about 2.5 years, we'll say, after the NES officially launched in the US. But I did already have an Atari-compatible system in my house. It was and I'm not going to call it a knockoff, it was a third-party system by Coleco. It was called the Gemini. It was not a ColecoVision with the Atari adapter. It was a standalone Atari VCS-compatible console that could only play 2600 VCS games. But that's all it was. It was an Atari not made by Atari. Just like how everybody made Pongs. The 80s were a wild time. And yes, Atari sued Coleco. Coleco won. And so everybody else was able to make clone systems. That's how those clone systems were possible, because they were using off-the-shelf parts. Any hobbyist could assemble one in their garage, just like you did with your Apple computers and early, you know, TRS-80s and everything else. So because assembling computers from off-the-shelf parts was a part of the industry at that time, the courts decided you can't stop people from assembling their own Atari-compatible machine in their garage. And that's essentially what Coleco did, and they were just selling it at retail, and the courts were like, yeah, they can do that because anybody can. There was no patent on the system because they weren't using customized hardware at all. That did bite Atari in the ass, unfortunately, which was one of the major mistakes they made. But this is my way of saying my first experience with Nintendo was on the Atari. We had Donkey Kong. In the arcades, I got to play Mario Brothers, and I got to play Popeye. One of the arcades I went to at the time, or one of the spaces I went to that had arcade machines, I should say, because back in the 80s, you could find arcades everywhere. You know, the lobbies of Kmart's and Walmart's and inside Pizza Huts and laundromats and movie theaters. They weren't just relegated to the mall. People seem to forget that. They were literally everywhere. So, like, you could run into a random arcade machine anywhere. And that's how I encountered Popeye. Popeye was actually at the laundromat, right next to Donkey Kong. So, most likely, the local Nintendo seller, you know, was doing a good job at that particular laundromat, apparently. But I did eventually get original Mario Brothers on the Atari. Or the Atari version, I should say. Let's be accurate so that people don't correct me in the comments. And I also had Donkey Kong and later Popeye. So I was aware enough at the time, and I was like 4 or 5, Nintendo was throwing their commercials on the TV, but you were also seeing Atari commercials and Coleco commercials, and you were starting to see Master System and TurboGrafx commercials as well, because those systems were already on the market as well. So I was at least aware enough to know that the Nintendo name, or the word Nintendo, was plastered on those arcade machines, Donkey Kong and Popeye. So I recognized those were, quote, Nintendo games. But I was also begging my parents for a TurboGrafx 16 at the same time. My sisters and I were both begging my parents for a Nintendo. TurboGrafx 16 was even harder to find in Kansas because it was only sold in major cities its entire North American run. It never made it to Kansas. If it did, it would have been Kansas City or Topeka or Wichita. It would have never made it to Podunk, Nowheresville I lived in. We didn't even have a real Kmart. We had a local knockoff. Because you gotta remember, these department store chains that we know today, Kmart, Target, Shopko's gone, Kmart, but you know what I'm saying, Walmart, etc. They were still fairly new, and they were still kind of not everywhere yet. Even Walmart wasn't everywhere yet. We didn't have a Walmart. Growing up, I didn't see a Walmart until I was like 12 years old. Walmart just didn't. It was Kmart everywhere. We had a few Pamidas. But anyways, we had this little local, like, kind of pseudo department store. It was more like a hardware store type place that also had like a toy aisle and an electronics aisle and like a clothing section. So it was sort of like a smaller scale, miniaturized half Kmart, double dollar store kind of situation. Because that's what these small town department stores were until Kmart and then later Walmart swooped in and put them out of business. That didn't happen until the 90s. You got to remember, they were just expanding in the 80s. Walmart themselves only had a few hundred stores in the 70s and only started to expand in the 80s. They didn't get massive until the late 90s. By then, Kmart was everywhere, and Walmart was basically trying to put Kmart out of business, which mission accomplished, but that's neither here nor there. But that's where I would see video games, if I saw them at all. Unless we went to the big town close by, which I will identify as Salina, Kansas. But if you live in Kansas, anywhere within 100 miles of Salina, that's your hub, your urban hub. Unless you're closer to Topeka or Wichita. Kansas City doesn't count because that's in Missouri. The little part of Kansas City that's in Kansas is the industrial, section. So it's like, people don't live there. That's just factories and warehouses, But I digress. Anyways, so it would have been impossible to even buy a TurboGrafx for my parents because the internet didn't exist yet in any tangible form. We didn't have a computer in the house, and if we would have, it wouldn't have had access to the internet anyways. That would have been beyond our limited financial resources at the time, because we were fairly poor at that time. Later in life, my parents would get better jobs as time progressed, and we would have better experiences, but in my early childhood, my parents weren't doing so hot. At this time, my mom was a waitress at a restaurant, and my dad was a bagger at a small-town grocery store. So they were making combined just barely above minimum wage together, because waitresses don't make shit, and Dad only worked part-time. So we didn't have a lot of money at the time. So getting an NES was our best bet, because the TurboGrafx, there was no chance in hell. And, we had to wait until it came down in price considerably, and Mom had to get help from her coworkers pooling their money together to buy her kids the NES for Christmas because we wanted an NES, and she was able to get one. I don't know if she put it on layaway or what she did, but she miraculously got us an NES for Christmas 1988. But that was it. That was the one present all me and my 3 sisters had to share. We all got one present that year, and it was the Nintendo. And it was the deluxe set that came with 2 controllers, the Zapper, Super Mario plus Duck Hunt. So it was like it wasn't the base set or the core set. It was the big one that I think most people got. By that time, Nintendo wasn't selling the set with Rob anymore because they didn't need to. By 1988, the NES was well established. You know, you already had Zelda 2, Metroid, you know, Contra, Castlevania. The heavy hitters were already out. Yeah, DuckTales, Chip 'n Dale, Mario Brothers 3, Tiny Toon Adventure. Those games hadn't come out yet, but it didn't matter. We still had plenty of great games to play at that time. Now, we were lucky to get the Nintendo for Christmas, but we didn't get our next batch of games until the following Christmas, where we got 3 games. We got Friday the and they were budget titles, by the way, probably on clearance at the video store or the Bogarts. If you lived in the Midwest, you probably remember Bogarts. I don't know if they're still around or not, so R.I.P. Bogarts, I guess. But anyways, we would rent video games from the Bogarts, and occasionally they would go on clearance, and that's probably where they got them. That would be my assumption. Bogarts is like a Midwestern small-town regional version of Kroger, I guess. I don't know if they even still exist. Hell, they were probably owned by Kroger by this point, or who knows. I don't know. But it's not important. I'm not even going to bother to look it up because I don't care. If you know, you know. So we got Friday the 13th. We got this game that as a kid we didn't know how to pronounce. It was spelled XEXYZ. As an adult, I've heard YouTubers pronounce it Zexies. I still just say XEXYZ, and so do me and my sisters. We never learned how to say it. I'm not going to bother. And then we got Super Mario Brothers 2, which was a big hit in our family. Because at that time, Mario Brothers, or the original Super Mario Brothers, was already looking dated compared to other mid-life cycle NES games. Because you gotta remember, at that time, they were already putting memory mappers and chips in the cartridges to expand the capabilities. So, like, the stock NES hardware was no longer the standard. Games weren't being made on the stock NES hardware anymore, like Super Mario Brothers was, excuse me. And we don't need to get into the whole Super Mario Brothers 2 bullshit. I don't give a fuck. It's not relevant. Who cares? Shut up. You don't have to bring it up every time somebody talks about the goddamn game. Okay? Fuck off. But we had Super Mario Brothers 2. We had Friday the 13th. And then we had that Japanese Hudson Soft game, XEXYZ. Which I'm willing to bet, if you're watching this video, you don't know what the fuck I'm talking about because nobody remembers that game. I don't even see it pop up on Nintendo lists when I watch videos of obscure games or hidden gems or anything. I've never seen anybody else ever mention that game. So I know it exists because I can download the ROM and play it. I've never met another person online or in real life that has ever heard of it or played it. So there you go. Great game, by the way. Friday the 13th, well, let's just say it was not a great game, but we still enjoyed it. And the reason we enjoyed it isn't because it's all we had. Fuck off. Because we could rent games regularly, again, from the Bogarts and from the not Blockbuster, but the local video store we had, because we lived in a small podunk town, and our next town over only had like 2,000 or 3,000 people. So that was our, quote, urban center. It was still a small town. We lived in a town with less than 1,000 people. We had no stores to speak of in our town. We had barely a grocery store, and it went out of business when I was like 8 or 9. Which, by the way, Dad would have lost his job because that's where he worked. He had moved on to better jobs by then, but I digress. So, early on, my exposure was to Nintendo. Now, I didn't have brand loyalty to video games. I never have, I never will. I've always been fascinated by pretty much everything. Now, I'm not one of those, ooh, it's shiny, I like it all. There are game systems, game companies, game developers, and game franchises I don't give a shit about. But by and large, I'm what you would classify as an all-in-one gamer, not just a type. I'm not a console gamer or an arcade gamer or a PC gamer. I like it all. I'm not even just a retro gamer. I don't have a PS5 because I can't afford it, but I do have a PS4. So and a PC with Steam and GOG. So I do still play more modern games than just Mario and Sonic. Just so you know. But at that time, Nintendo was everywhere. And so for me, I had a lot of fun with Mario, both the Mario games, although I would play Mario 2 more than regular Mario because Mario 2 was the, in my opinion, better game. And as a kid, we didn't care about the backstory of how Mario 2 was developed. We didn't know, we didn't care. We didn't know. We didn't care about the so-called video game crash and the importance of Super Mario Brothers. We didn't know. We just played the fucking games. And so I would rent games from the various sources, the Bogarts or the video store that I can't remember the name of because it's long fucking gone. It was gone by the 90s. But it's not important. Well, that's because the town eventually, the big town, I should say, next over, you know. They were like it was a 15-mile drive to the next town. They didn't get a Blockbuster, but the next big town that had about 10,000 people did get a Blockbuster. And so everybody within a 30-mile radius essentially flocked to that town. And that is where we would start, you know, people would rent their videos. By then we had moved to Salina, which did have a Blockbuster, but also had local video stores and a Hollywood Video. So we would mostly rent from the Carols, actually, is where we would rent our videotapes because they were cheaper. Remember Carols? They were kind of, if you've ever been inside a Hastings, Carols is basically a Hastings. For all I know, it might be the same company, I don't know. But it was a company, it was a retailer called Carols. Carols Bookstores, I think is what it was called. Or gift shop or something like that. That's where we would regularly rent our videotapes. So I want to be clear, I was not renting videos, games, or movies from Blockbuster. I was not a Blockbuster kid. I never stepped foot inside a Blockbuster until like 2005. They were already on the way out by the time I finally went into Blockbuster. And that was because the town I lived in at that time only had 2 video stores left, Hollywood and Blockbuster. And so I didn't have much of a choice. It was just like, well, you know, if I want to rent movies and they don't have what I want at Hollywood, I have no choice but to go to Blockbuster. And even the Hollywood closed their doors before Blockbuster did. So I'm talking tail end of its life before I even started experiencing Blockbuster. So I wasn't around for the heyday. I was back in the renting videos from the local family shop, the mom and pop shop as they call it, or the regional chain like Carols. I have to look Carols up to find out what they were, and also Bogarts. I would like leave a comment. Do you remember Carols or Bogarts? If not, well, I'm sorry. Especially if you lived in Salina, Kansas, let me know what you remember. Because we would move to Salina or around it, one of its, quote, suburbs, which it's not a city, so it doesn't have suburbs, but small towns outside of it that are close enough that it is what it is. Kansas is a weird place. So, when I talk about Salina, I'm not going to be accurate in what was there at any given point in time, because we only lived there for about a year, but we shopped there regular. But because it was the, quote, urban hub of north central Kansas, it was a rapidly changing city. So what was the... And also, because I didn't live there and we were only going there for specific purposes, I wouldn't have known what else was there because I was a kid. I only went where my parents drove me. So I know there was, like, Food for Less, because that's where we bought our groceries, because, you know, we would rent videotapes and games from Bogarts because they were an option, but we bought our groceries from Food for Less because they were cheaper. I guess. Do you remember Food for Less? I don't know if they're even still a thing. I don't know how to describe Food for Less. But you can kind of get the picture. You know what I'm saying? So I had an NES at this time. And I didn't get my next generation console until 1994. On September 7th, 1994. My 12th birthday. And if you know me at all or have watched any of my previous videos, you know that that was the day I got my Sega Genesis. Now, I had already played Super Nintendo. What the hell is that? I can't, there it is. It's like I can't find it. I already played Super Nintendo at friends' houses and sampled it, playing the demos at like the Kmart or the Sears, because Sears was a bigger deal back then. Walmart, like I said, didn't really exist yet in a lot of the country. They were real heavy in like the central Midwest and the southern Midwest, so like Oklahoma and like Missouri had more Walmarts. Kansas didn't start getting Walmarts until later. I remember when Salina got a Walmart because it was a big deal. Because, you know, it was like, yay, now we got a Kmart and a Walmart. And that Kmart lasted a whole hell of a lot longer than it should have, to be honest. Because the Walmart was automatically better, because Walmarts were always better than Kmarts. I'm sorry. I love Kmart, don't get me wrong, but once Walmart came on the scene, Kmart, what's a Kmart? I'll shop at Walmart, thank you very much. They were always better than Kmart, and anyone who misremembers otherwise has brain damage. Kmarts were good when there was no other option, but once you had a Walmart, you never went back to Kmart. You had no reason to. That's why Kmart went out of business. It wasn't mismanaged. Some of it was mismanagement by the company, but Walmart made a concerted effort to put Kmart out of business, and they succeeded. They went out of their way to kill Kmart, because Kmart was their only competition at the time. I want to be clear on that. Walmart was not the juggernaut it is today. They didn't become that until the early 90s, because they were growing in the 80s. This is very easy. There are documentaries on this. It's very easy to verify. So you likely, if you lived in the 80s, if you were a kid or a teenager in the 80s, unless you lived in a well-populated, and I don't mean big city, I mean like 10,000 to 20,000 people city, small city I should say, in that south central region of the U.S., you probably didn't know what a Walmart was, unless you saw their commercials and you had to drive 100 miles to get to one. But they were expanding rapidly, so by the 90s, you did have a Walmart. And then we didn't care about Kmart anymore. And the reason why I mention this is because it was Walmart where I started buying my video games once I had the opportunity to do so. Because they had a better selection than Kmart, and they had better prices than Kmart. If a game was $50 at Kmart, it was $42, $47 at Walmart. Not a big discount, but you know what? You gotta save money wherever you can. Kmart always undercut always undercut Kmart. Always. No matter what. Across the board, if something was $10 at Kmart, it was like $9.25 at Walmart. It wasn't always a big difference, but they always undercut them somewhere. And those undercuts add up after a while. And when you're poor, you save money where you can. That's you got to remember, Walmart was originally called Discount City. That was their name. They were actually called Discount City. And I remember when the sign said Walmart Discount City. That's what they were actually. That was their name before they were just called Walmart Supercenters. This is also easy to verify. So by about 91, 92, I was firmly in Camp Nintendo. I'd slowly started to build up a decent not massive, but nice little NES collection library at the time. By way of, because by 91, the Genesis was already on the scene. The Super Nintendo was right around the corner. The TurboGrafx had already come and gone, essentially. The Neo Geo was out. There were other options. It wasn't just the Nintendo anymore. The NES was aging. So, used games were coming down in prices. And you could start to see games at Goodwills and pawn shops and yard sales. So that's how I acquired games at that time. I would get them at yard sales and stuff like that. Goodwill, etc. And so, I had a few more games. But again, I was coming across I was buying whatever I came across. I wasn't going to the store and buying what I wanted because I couldn't afford it. So I had stuff like, Back to the Future 2 and 3, Little Nemo, which was fun, but hella fucking hard. I had the Three Stooges game. Yes, I had both Zeldas, and I loved them both, and played the shit out of both of them. And I'm one of those people, I'll say it, I preferred Zelda 2. I still love and respect what Zelda did, but Zelda 2 was, at the time, the better game. Because it was, it did more. It just was. All those obnoxious assholes that say it sucks because it doesn't play anything like the other Zeldas. There were no other Zeldas at the time. There were 2. It's the same assholes that shit on Freddy's Revenge or Season of the Witch for being too different. There was no fucking franchise yet. There was nothing to compare it to except for the original. And, Mario Brothers 2 was significantly different from Mario Brothers, so why wouldn't Zelda 2 be significantly different from Zelda? Donkey Kong 2, or Donkey Kong Jr. as it was known, was significantly different from Donkey Kong. That was the expectation at the time. So all you Zelda 2 haters, eat a big bowl of shit and shut the fuck up. And I had other games like Super Spike V-Ball and NES World Cup or whatever the fuck it was called. I don't know, some stupid bullshit soccer game, which is not just a bullshit video game, it's a bullshit sport, so, shut up if you like soccer. It's not a real sport. Okay? Europeans, it's not a real sport. Okay? Play football. Real football. American football is a real sport. You fucking weirdos. Oh, I'm so excited. I've been watching the game for 3 hours and the score's 0-0. Stick this up your butt, you weirdos. Jesus Christ. 3 hours and nobody scores a goddamn... Fuck off. That's not a sport. That's a bunch of assholes playing dodgeball. Fucking soccer. It was a shitty Nintendo game. Because it's a shitty sport. And I don't remember the other shitty games I had because they sucked. And I just... I remember having, like, Total Recall. Because, it was... family up the street was having a yard sale and they had Total Recall for like $5, and I was like, hey, buy me this game because it was $5 and I wanted something else to play. But I will, as a kid, I enjoyed the Nintendo, but even as a kid, I did not like the controller because it hurt my hands right here. It put pressure right here because of the sharp edges, and it's an itty-bitty controller that you have to really squeeze your hand in. And I've always had bigger hands than most kids because, I'm a bigger person than most kids. I was bigger than a lot of the kids in my age range. Not taller, but, and I don't just mean fatter, but I've always had bigger hands. And anyways, so the NES controller sucked. And I'm never going to change my mind on that. Even, especially as an adult, it even sucks more. I do not play retro Nintendo games with an actual NES controller, and I never will again. Thank God for emulation, and I can choose a superior controller to play NES games on today, because otherwise I would not play NES games today. Thank you very much. That little rectangular piece of shit is a goddamn abomination, and I don't care, they introduced the D-pad. Well, actually, no, they didn't, but we're not going to get into that. But They weren't even the only company that had a D-pad at the time. The TurboGrafx and the Master System had D-pads, and even the 7800 had a D-pad as an option, as did several computers. Yeah, Nintendo may have, quote, done it first, but they only did it first, technically, worldwide. Master System, or the SG-1000, which was the predecessor to the Master System, had a D-pad, came out the exact same day as the Famicom in Japan. So shut up with your D-pad and your Nintendo controllers are great. No, they're not. I will go on record as saying I don't think Nintendo has ever made a good controller. Ever. Not even the Super Nintendo controller. They've always sucked at making controllers. And the weirdos, the Nintendo weirdos that like to sing Nintendo controller praises, go touch a Genesis or a 3DO or an Xbox or a PlayStation or a Saturn controller and then shut the fuck up. Nintendo makes the worst controllers. They always have. Always have. And I'm tired of people giving them flowers for making good controllers when they don't. But they do and always have made great games. Oh, by the way, even the NES as a machine fucking sucked. Which is why I'll never own an original NES. And don't give me that cockamamie bullshit about how you can replace the connectors. Yeah, you do that. And that's still a temporary fix because those connectors are still going to wear out. You have to keep replacing the connectors. That's a bullshit design. And it doesn't matter because at this point, the cartridges have already been damaged thoroughly by those shitty connectors anyways. So shut up. The NES is a terrible designed system that had great games, no competition, so everybody bought one because we had no alternative. No viable, realistic alternative. Again, the TurboGrafx technically existed, but unless you lived in a major city on the East or West Coast, it didn't exist. It might as well have not existed. Same with the Master System, which was also not available nationwide. It was only available in major markets. It was more readily available than the TurboGrafx, but still not widespread. Atari had a broader reach with the 7800 than Sega and Tonka did with the Master System. And yes, Tonka distributed the Master System in the US, not Sega. That's a long story we don't need to get into. Not in this video. People forget that as well. Because for some reason people forget that those Japanese companies were small at the time and really struggled to bring their products over to the US. Which is why Nintendo games were on Atari and Coleco systems and computers in the first place. Because Nintendo couldn't bring the Famicom over on their own. They were trying to get Atari to help them do that. That deal went south, and they had no choice but to bring the Famicom over themselves and redesign it as what we now know the NES. Which, by the way, went through a couple of redesigns before we got to what we got. Which, by the way, they should have stuck with the original design because that would have been better than the toaster we got. But, while I did have occasionally fond memories of getting to play NES games, most of my memories were frustration, and not just because when I got to play a game it was too goddamn hard in the first place. I'm looking at you, Mega Man, Battletoads, Back to the Future. Ugh. But also, you had to get lucky back then if your game was even going to work. Everybody tells horror stories of the satanic rituals we had to do to get our NES to work. The common one was blow in the cartridge, or wipe it out with a Q-tip, which is what the instruction manual said to do. Put a little rubbing alcohol on the Q-tip and clean the connectors. That is what the console instruction manual told you to do. Well, actually, they told you to buy the official cleaning kit that Nintendo sold, which was just a Q-tip and alcohol. So, fuck you, Nintendo. But, Anyways, well, I mean, it wasn't literally a Q-tip, but that's essentially what it was, okay? That's all it was. As long as you had a Q-tip and some rubbing alcohol, you didn't need the official cleaning kit. But you had to have something. Now, there were other tricks like jiggling the cartridge, shoving it down all the way, and sticking another cartridge on top of it to hold it in place, sticking it in and pulling it out and sticking it back in. There were all kinds of satanic rituals everybody went through to get their NES to work. And if you were lucky, you'd get 20 to 30 minutes, and you'd be right in the middle of an intense boss battle, and you were one hit away from killing the boss, and you had like 4 or 5 hits to go, and you were doing good, and then blink, blink, blink. Fuck you, Nintendo, and fuck you assholes that say the NES was good. No, it wasn't. It was a piece of shit that everybody put up with because we had no other option. Was the NES a success? Yeah, again, because there was no other option. It wasn't because Nintendo was better than Sega or better than TurboGrafx. It was because Sega couldn't get their systems in stores for you to buy, neither could TurboGrafx, and Nintendo had all the third-party support because they had the reach. And so it just made more sense to put your game on it, and plus the illegal backdoor contracts that, you know, still bite them in the ass to this day. But we didn't know that technically that Tengen Tetris game was illegal, allegedly, or unofficial, unlicensed. I just bought it at a yard sale because it was Tetris. I didn't know that it was, you know, a unlicensed version of Tetris. I was like, oh, cool, Atari, Tetris, awesome. I didn't get to play the Nintendo Tetris until years later. So for me, Tetris was Atari. Sorry, Nintendo nerds. That was my experience with the NES. And I had other unlicensed games, as did every kid, in their collection because, you know, you'd go to the mall at Christmas time and there would be the pop-up seller selling those Chinese knockoff cartridges for like $6 when the real game in the Radio Shack or the Sears was like $30-40. Yeah, you were going to buy the Chinese knockoff cartridge because you wanted something to play. I feel sorry for the poor souls that got duped into taking home an Action 52. Even I'll admit that game is garbage. But the NES had some great games, and I got to play a lot of them. Not just because, like I said, I picked up games used at the secondhand market, and I had a lot of friends who all had Nintendos. Literally every one of my friends had a Nintendo. And later on, my cousins, who were unfortunate to get the 7800 first, got a Nintendo later in life. So, you know, I got to expand my reach of games I got to play by way of renting games, buying used games, secondhand, or playing games at friends' houses. So I got to play significantly more Nintendo games than I actually owned. I only owned less than 20 games total. Maybe 16 or 17, to be honest with you. I could sit down and do the count. As a kid, I only got to play about 30 or 40 total Nintendo games by way of rentals and, you know, friends, etc. Because even though friends had other games, they were still playing Mario, Mega Man, Zelda, because that's what everybody was playing. So you went to your friend's house, they wanted to play a game. What did we play? Super Mario Bros. 3, because everybody had it. Everybody wanted to play it. It didn't matter if your friend had Gauntlet or Double Dribble. We weren't playing Double Dribble or Gauntlet. We were playing Super Mario Bros. 3 because that's the game everybody played. But occasionally we would get to play a Joust or a Gauntlet or, you know, maybe a Clue Land if you had one of those weird kids friends who only had the early black box games and they were, because that's what they got for their Christmas and they never bothered to buy anything else because they were too poor and so they were the cheerleader that was like, this game's great, y'all should try it, because nobody else had it and they were stuck with it. And so they were trying desperately to get somebody else to enjoy Clue Land. You know who you are. You're not watching this video because you don't remember me, because that was 30-something years ago, and we only knew each other in first grade, so you don't remember me. But I remember you peddling Clu Clu Land on everybody, and I'm sorry, dude, your parents sucked. They bought you Clu Clu Land. They were assholes. I'm sorry. You know? Tell it to your therapist. Leave me out of it. But, once I got the Genesis, I got my Genesis on my 12th birthday, September 7th, 1992, excuse me. 1994, excuse me. I'm getting tangled up. That was the last day I powered on the Nintendo. I was allowed to keep the NES in my bedroom because of reasons I've talked about in previous videos. Go watch those videos. So, even though I had sisters, I had to share it, so I would have to let my sisters come into my bedroom and play the Nintendo. Long story short, I had a developmental issue, and so I had a doctor's note that told my parents that I needed to play more video games to help develop my motor skills and hand-eye coordination. So they let me keep, and I didn't have as many friends as my sisters did, because we moved a lot, and, you know, I had kids I would go to their house and play their Nintendo, but they weren't friends. I was friends with their NES, not the kid. Which, by the way, eventually parents caught on to that and stopped letting me play with their kid because I was just playing their video games. So yeah, anyways, when I say friends, I mean, you know, my friend, another kid's Nintendo, that was my friend. The other kid wasn't my friend. Yeah, whatever. Anyways, once I got the Genesis, I was done with Nintendo. And I don't mean the company, I mean the Nintendo, the NES. I was done. I put it in my sister's bedroom and I let them have it. Here you go, girls. You play Nintendo. I've got Sonic the Hedgehog and Mortal Kombat. I don't need fucking Mario anymore. And so, from 94 till 96, I was all in on Sega. And at this time, I had a job. I had two jobs. On the weekends and in the mornings, I was detasseling corn in the cornfields with the other kids my age, because that was a program that the school, the middle school I went to did. It was an after-school weekend program. It was a summer program. I don't remember the details, but I got to go out in the cornfield and detassel corn for a few hours a day, and then every couple of weeks I'd get a paycheck that was mine because I was like 13 years old, and I didn't have bills because I was 13 years old. And so I had that, and then after school and on the weekends, I also had a paper route, which gave me a little extra income. So at that time, I was able to buy more video games. And no, I was not buying Nintendo games. Not even for my sisters. If they wanted Kirby's Adventure, or Little Samson, or whatever was coming out at that time on the NES, they had to buy it themselves. I was not buying games for my sisters. Because I was spending my money on the Genesis. So I had a lot of Genesis games. Too many to list. I mean, I had a shit ton of Genesis games. Probably 50 to 60 Genesis games. In about it took me about 3 to 4 years to collect a pretty good size Genesis collection. And you gotta remember, I got my Genesis in September of 94. The 32X was just about to come out. The Saturn was just about to come out. Sega was only months away from shifting their focus away from the Genesis to the next generation. They were already discounting the console. They were already discounting the games. And it had already been out for several years, so there were already a backlog of games that were already on clearance or, discounted. And again, there were games at yard sales and secondhand stores, etc. So I was able, or I could buy games from the local IGA because we moved to a town that didn't have a Bogarts. They had an IGA instead. Remember IGA? Yeah, the times were different back then. Everything wasn't just Walmart and Target back then like it is today. We actually had other stores. Actually, I guess it would have been Kroger. IGA was a grocery store. But like all grocery stores back then, they also rented videos, games, and tapes because they just did. Because smaller towns didn't have Blockbuster videos. Or if they did, only the middle class and the rich kids could afford to shop there. Everybody else had to get their videos from the cheaper places because we had no choice. So anyways, back to that again. So I was able to buy used games from the IGA or the local video store or the pawn shop or the Goodwill, because every town has a Goodwill. If they don't have a Goodwill, they have a Salvation Army, but it's the same fucking thing. So I might say Goodwill, but it was probably a Salvation Army or something else. It's just because Goodwill's the Walmart of secondhand stores, thrift stores. And yeah, occasionally you'd come across a game at like a flea market or a yard sale. So I was able to amass a pretty solid Genesis collection. And you would think, because I had a bigger circle of friends at this point, you would think I'd go to my friend's house, somebody would have a Super Nintendo. I had 6 friends at this time, not counting my sister's friends, who I was also friends with. I'm talking about the kids, the quote, other boys. I'm a female. I was trans, but I had to pretend to be a boy at the time. So let's just put that on the table, and then it's there. We've established it. Move on. So the boys I had to play with, there were 5 other boys, and then one cousin that I don't count among my friends because he was a cousin. So I had a circle of 6 other, 6 boy kids that I hung out with. Out of those 6, one had a Super Nintendo as his only machine, or his primary machine. He also had a Jaguar, but we made fun of him for that, and for good reason, because if your parents bought you a Jaguar, you probably don't talk to your parents today. I wouldn't, because they were cruel and unusual. But I digress. The other 5, Genesis only, PC, he didn't even have a console, NES, he didn't even have a next-gen console, and he had both Genesis and Super Nintendo. I'm not going to name them because we don't need to get into that. But the thing is, the kid that had both, his parents were divorced, and so his mom and stepdad lived in town, and so he went to school in town and lived at his mom's house. That's where he got the Sega, because, spoilers, more people had Sega at that time than Nintendo. The Super Nintendo didn't take off and outpace Sega until the last 2 years of the console wars, and that was when Sega stopped trying to sell Genesis and were desperately trying to get anybody to consider possibly thinking about buying a Saturn. So they had already exited the market and left Nintendo all to their little lonesome selves with no competition at a time they were making the best games that were ever going to be made on the system. So yeah, the tail end, everybody got a Super Nintendo. But from like 90 to 95, everybody had a Sega. The Super Nintendo a lot of kids had the Super Nintendo. I'm not going to blow smoke up your ass, but more kids had a Sega than a Super Nintendo. This is a verifiable fact. There's plenty of month-to-month, year-to-year sales records that prove the Genesis was outpacing the Super Nintendo year over year, month over month, most of its life, until Sega stopped trying and left the market to Nintendo by themselves. Sega was still making games for the Genesis, but if you look at their tail end of the Genesis, they weren't trying that hard. Nintendo was. Sega was doing shit like Virtua Fighter 2, a 2D version of a 3D game, and Sonic 3D Blast. That's what Sega was doing. And Nintendo was doing Super Mario RPG, Killer Instinct, Donkey Kong Country 1, 2, and 3, etc., etc. You were getting the best games you were ever going to get on the Super Nintendo at that time. Sega was already done with the market. So let's make that clear. But I had a Genesis. All my friends had Genesis. So I couldn't even go to my friend. By the way, that friend who had the Super Nintendo, I forgot to say, he kept it at his dad's house, who lived on a farmhouse outside of town, and he could only play it on the weekends. And we never got to go to his dad's house because he lived out in the country and we couldn't ride our bikes that far. So even when we went to his house, we played Sega. And then the friend that only had the NES, well, when we went to his house, we didn't play video games because none of us were interested in the NES at that time. We had all moved on to bigger and better things. Sorry, kid. If you stumbled across this video and you happen to remember this, you know, we were friends. We did play other games together. Play games together, not video games. We did, like, Nerf and squirt guns and, you know, Power Rangers and stuff like that. Role-play type stuff. We didn't play Nintendo because you went to a kid's house in 95 and all they had was an NES. If you stayed friends with that kid, it was because they were cool and you didn't care that they only had NES, because you understood that, you know, they're poor like you, and so that's all they had. So, you know, you sympathized, but you weren't like, let's play Blades of Steel. No, thank you. We'll go over to, I'll just say, Jerry's house, and we'll play Mortal Kombat 2 on his Sega, because that's a better game. So that's what we did. So I got to play a lot more Sega games than I got to own, even though I got to own a lot of Sega games. Because, like I said, this was the tail end of the console's life cycle. I had a job finally, an income, and games were coming down in prices, and it was more readily available to get used games. So I was able to amass a pretty good Genesis collection real quick. I'm talking like, within 2 years, I had about 60 to 70 Genesis games. I never got more than maybe 20 NES games total over the course of my entire childhood. Because I just lost interest in it. My sisters did occasionally kept buying games for the NES, because it was their system that they all three had to share. And, well, the teenage girl, once she got to be a teenager, she wasn't interested in video games anymore. She was all into The Boys. And the younger two sisters, the baby, wasn't into video games because she was a toddler. She was into watching Rugrats and sucking her thumb. And the sister that was a year and a half younger than me that was playing the NES, she was happy as a clam to just play Super Mario forever. Because that was the game she liked. Or Tetris, because she liked Tetris for some reason. Look, I don't hate Tetris, but I recognize that it's popular and it did what it did. But it's not a great game, guys, gals, others, NBs. It's not a great game, y'all. It's not. Dr. Mario's better. I'll say it, and I don't give a fuck what you do in the comments or what. Columns is a better game. Tetris is dull and boring and repetitive. Columns, Dr. Mario, they're better puzzle games. Alright? People need to just stop playing Tetris. Or stop blowing smoke up its butt about how great it is when it ain't. It's not bad. It's just not as good as everybody fucking says. By the way, I never owned a Game Boy. By the way, up to this point, the only other consoles I got to play, either at friends' houses, or we would occasionally get to rent a system, a newer system, from one of the video stores, or like I said, you know, the Bogarts, the IGA, etc. Or we would get to experience the demo at the Sears, or the Radio Shack, or the Kmart, until Walmart came on the scene. And then we would play the demos at the Walmart. So the other game consoles I got to read about in the magazines, but never got to play, all of them. I got to read about 3DO, and Neo Geo, and CDI, and later 32X, and PlayStation, and blah, 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 blah. But I got to play a Master System at a friend's house who that's what he had. Poor soul. I got to play Neo Geo, not the home console, but it doesn't matter because they were identical to the arcade machine. So I got to play Neo Geo games at the arcades because they were the same game, and the Genesis ports of those games because they came to Genesis because everything did. And while they weren't identical, they were good enough for the sensibilities of a 12-year-old, a 13-year-old at the time. We didn't count pixels back then and compare screenshots to see which one had, you know, the right number of pixels. We didn't give a fuck. Nerds didn't start doing that until the internet came on the scene. And those assholes can fuck right off. If you're hung up on this version is not playable because there's no mountain in the background of that one stage on that one home console port, you're an asshole. Shut the fuck up. Just play the goddamn game. Jesus fucking Christ. But I've already bitched about that in other videos. Nobody cared. Even the magazine said Mortal Kombat 2 was a 9 because it was faithful to the arcade. And it was faithful to the arcade. It didn't have to be pixel perfect, that was physically impossible for the hardware. We didn't fucking care. But I also got to experience Super Nintendo at a couple of other places throughout the time. Again, there was an arcade machine that had some Super Nintendo games in it. The Super System, I think is what it was called. So I would throw a quarter in that from time to time. And yes, we got to play Killer Instinct in the arcades, because it was an arcade first. People forget that. And, you know, it's not a Nintendo game, but it was, I had it on Genesis, but it was also on Super Nintendo, and some people had it on Super Nintendo. Later, it came out on PlayStation and Sega CD and 32X and everything else. But I also got to play Primal Rage in the arcade before I got to play it on the Genesis. And yeah, it looks better in the arcade, but you still have all the characters, you still have all the backgrounds, the moves, the fatalities. Who cares if the music's a little muffled? Who cares if the graphics are a little squished? You're still playing Primal Rage at home. Be grateful for what you have, you cock-knockers. I digress. But, and I've told this story before, in 1996, I saved up my money. It was September 1996. I put it on layaway, because they let me do that, even though it wasn't officially available for sale. It was sort of like a layaway pre-order situation at Kmart. And on launch day, I paid off my Nintendo 64, and I got a brand new, in-the-box launch Nintendo 64, and a brand new, in-the-box, sold separately, launch copy of Super Mario 64. So, I skipped the Super Nintendo altogether. I had the NES, and I got to dabble in Nintendo on the Atari. I had the Sega. Again, no brand loyalty here. I was just going where the games were. But I was obsessed with Super Mario 64. I desperately wanted to play Super Mario 64. So I bought a Nintendo 64 on launch day. Here's the thing. Again, I'm a poor kid. I've got a job now, but as a family, we're still relatively poor. And my job doesn't pay a lot of money. I mean, a paper route, I was getting about $70 a month from the paper route, and about $300 a month from the summer job. So not a lot, okay? I had money. I didn't have a lot of money. I just had enough money to buy the things I wanted. Which, by the way, I wasn't only buying video games. I was also buying comic books, still buying action figures to an extent, and I was buying trading cards because everybody was obsessed with trading cards in the 90s. Yes, you were, and if you weren't, you're remembering wrong, or all your friends were. Everybody was. So, you either had sports cards, or you had other trading cards, comic books, or movies, or Ninja Turtles, or whatever. And then later, Pokemon and Magic the Gathering changed that, but we don't need to get into that yet. So, next up, I've got the N64 in my lap, and I'm driving home. But my dad has to take a pit stop at the pawn shop because, he's got to pick up because it's payday, he's got to pick up the stereo that he pawned last week in between paydays so he could buy groceries, because that's what we did. Payday, you go pick up the items you pawned at the pawn shop, you go home, you buy groceries, you spend your paycheck, and then the off week, you pawn everything back, and this was an endless cycle for us poor folks, because it's what you did. At the pawn shop, I saw this drum set. It was an incomplete drum set. It didn't have a bass drum, but I wanted this drum set. And it was $40 for the whole thing, minus the bass drum, and there were no cymbals. So it was a snare drum, 2 toms and a floor tom, and a hi-hat stand but no hi-hat. So, 75% of a drum set. Now, I was a drummer in school, so I wanted a drum set because I wanted to get better at playing the drums. But there was also, for $60, a Super Nintendo for $60, and next to the Super Nintendo was literally a shoebox full of games, about 15 or so games. And the pawn shop had $30 for the whole shoebox. So for $90, I could get a Super Nintendo and nice chunk of games. And good games. Zelda was in that box. Mario was in that box. Mario World. Some football game. There was a Japanese game called Kendo Rage. Knights of the Round was in that box. There was some good stuff in that box. Killer Instinct was one of them. Primal Rage was one of them. Maximum Carnage was another one. So I was like, hey, I could get the drum set that I really want and this Super Nintendo if I take the N64 back to Kmart and get my money back. So I told my dad that's what I wanted to do. And, of course, we had to have a discussion because he knew how much I wanted the N64 and how hard I worked to save up the money to buy it. But I was like, nah, I really want that drum set, and if I take the 64 back to the Kmart, I'll have the money to buy the drum set, and then I can also buy the Super Nintendo plus all of these games, which will probably mathematically give me more joy than just one game anyways. So I convinced him to do that. So, September 1996, the N64 is on the scene. The Saturn and the PlayStation have been out for a couple of years. The 3DO had already come and gone. The Neo Geo was already a memory. And now I'm finally getting my Super Nintendo for the first time in 1996. So you have to understand, I'm coming at the Super Nintendo from the perspective of someone who had an NES, but don't have as fond memories of it as everybody else does. I have fond memories of the games, just not the experience of having to perform satanic rituals to play those games for 5 minutes at a time. But also the controller putting welts in my hands because it was sharp. And then I had, at this point, a couple of good solid years of playing Sega. You know, and even up to that point, playing Super Nintendo and Sega at other people's houses. You know, other kids' houses, as I would visit other kids. And it would come up. Maybe I was the one that suggested it, but it would come up. Hey, let's play some Sega. Let's play some Mario All-Stars or Mario Kart or whatever. Oh, and by the way, Mario Kart was in that box as well. So I got, like I said, there was like 15 or so games. I don't remember the exact number, but it was all good games except for that football game, which was not good. But everything else was pretty much good games. So I all of a sudden, I have a legit Super Nintendo collection in one shot for about $90. So for under $150, I got a drum set, most of a drum set, and a Super Nintendo with a good selection of games. Now, did that mean I was blinded by the Nintendo magic and I unhooked my Genesis and gave it to my sisters and played Super Nintendo only? Yeah, fucking right. They had pass-throughs at the time, the RF switch. So I hooked the Genesis up directly to the VCR and hooked that into the TV because, yes, I wanted it to run through the VCR so I could videotape my gameplay and other things because I had a VCR. And then I hooked the Super Nintendo's out, RF out, into the Genesis in because it had the pass-through because the idea was you could hook your TV antenna or your VCR into the Genesis so you could still use your TV as a TV, not just a game console. Because that's what we did back then. And yes, the Super Nintendo did have, and it came with the composite cables. I could have used the AV cables, but my TV didn't have composite inputs. It only had RF, so I didn't have an option. So I just used the RF switch, which, by the way, was exactly the same RF switch the NES used, so that was convenient. And then I just stuck the composite cables, the RCA cables, as we called them back in the time. We didn't call them composite cables. It's the terminology we used. Nerds probably called them composite cables. I knew them as RCA cables because when you went to Radio Shack, that's what the guy at Radio Shack called them. Alright, so now I have a Super Nintendo, but it's hooked up to the same TV as my Genesis. So here's an average day, just to paint you a picture. It's Saturday morning. I've already finished watching my cartoons and ate my cereal, and now I'm ready to play video games for the rest of the day. I go to my bedroom, and I power on the Sega. I'm gonna play 30 minutes to an hour of Sonic 2, and then after I get bored, with that, I'm going to play a little bit of, maybe a little bit of ToeJam and Earl, Panic on Funkatron, great game. And then I'm going to, call my sisters into the room, and we're going to have some Mortal Kombat 2 tournaments, because we all liked Mortal Kombat 2, and my sister was too good at that game with Mileena. I couldn't beat my sister, no matter who I picked, because she was too good at Mileena. I was good with Raiden and Baraka and Sub-Zero and Scorpion, and I could beat anybody but Mileena. Sometimes I would play as Reptile just because his fatality was easy to do. Back down A on the Sega controller. It was just back down A. Easy to do. And then he would rip his mask off, throw his tongue around your neck, and swallow your head whole. Thumbs up. By the way, I was happy to play Mortal Kombat 2 on the Genesis because, yeah, it didn't look as good as the arcade. It looked at least as good, for the most part, as the Super Nintendo version, so I thought at the time. I was good enough with it. It still had the blood, it still had the babalities and the friendships and the gore. I was good. And then I would play a little bit, maybe 20 minutes or so of Biohazard Battle. The point is, I would play a good solid 3 hours of Sega before I would, okay, now let's try out the Super Nintendo. And I'd pop in Super Mario World because I'd played it before. It was a fun game. I loved it. And I'd play some Super Mario World with my sisters because it was a 2-player game that you could play with your friends and your sisters. And we would play a good solid hour of Super Mario World, and then they would get distracted by whatever girls did at the time and go do their girl things. Dolls, makeup, MTV, or whatever it was. I don't know. I didn't get invited. Whatever they did, they would get bored with playing video games and then go do their own thing. And I was left to play on my own. Well, yeah, Super Mario World is a single-player game. I had more fun playing it with my sister, so I didn't play it. If they didn't want to play with me 2-player, I didn't play Super Mario World on my own because it just wasn't as much fun. So then I would pop in The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Now, I didn't have the strategy guide, we didn't have the internet, and none of my friends had a Super Nintendo. They all had Segas, or, they were moving on to PlayStations at the time, or, nobody had N64 yet because it just came out. Like I said, this was like, it just came out. But I'd play a little bit of Zelda and then get stuck and then get frustrated and turn it off because I didn't know what to do. And then I would try other games. I'd play a little bit of Kendo Rage. Way hard game. I'd get mad at the game, throw the controller at the wall, throw the game in the box, and then try something else. Maybe Pro Action Football, I think is what it was called. With my dad, if you wanted to play some, Packers versus Dallas Cowboys, because, it was how I could get my dad to play video games with me. Or I would play some SimCity for a little bit. And then I'd get bored with the Super Nintendo and go back to Sega and play some Castlevania Bloodlines, or some Shinobi 3, or some Mega Turrican, and then play that for 2 or 3 hours. And then, alright, now I'm ready to try Super Nintendo again. And then I'm looking through the box of games and I'm like, man, I got gypped. I'm going to be honest with you, I wasn't loving the Super NES when I first got it. Yeah, Mario was fun with my sisters. Zelda was fun for a spell, but then it was frustrating if you didn't know what to do. I didn't have, I only played Kendo Rage a couple of times and then, stopped playing it. I only played Knights of the Round a couple of times and then got bored. It wasn't that great. It was better than a lot of games I had at the time, but it wasn't. I had Streets of Rage 1 and 2 on the Genesis at the time. Streets of Rage 2 was where it was at. So if I was in the mood for that type of game, I was playing I also had Golden Axe, on the Sega, and I had Altered Beast, and I had, Maximum Carnage, and some other beat-em-ups on the Genesis. I didn't need to bother with, Maximum Carnage on the Super Nintendo. I can play it on the Sega. I didn't need to play the Super Nintendo version. So that was the first game I traded to the game store. Was Kendo Rage, Knights of the Round, and Maximum Carnage. I traded those 3 in, and I bought a Genesis game. That was when I got Gunstar Heroes. Yeah, Sega was doing it for me, Nintendo wasn't. But eventually, as time went on, I would buy other games. Killer Instinct would eventually enter the fold. I got Super Mario RPG, and that game was fantastic. Eventually, I would get Star Fox. Game's fucking rubbish. Why do people like it? I don't know. There were better 3D games on the 32X. I'm sorry, but that's the fucking truth. Go play Shadow Squadron. Or, fucking Star Wars Arcade. It's a better experience. Yeah, I eventually got a 32X, because like I said, I had a job now and I didn't have bills. So, I started, slowly I started getting to experience the broader depth of the Super Nintendo library. Yeah, if there was a game that was on both systems, and I already had it on Genesis, I didn't need to buy it on Super Nintendo. There was no point to it. Maybe it was going to have better background music, maybe it was going to have better colors, but so what? I was already having fun playing the Genesis version. There was no reason to own a game on Super Nintendo if I already owned it on Genesis, with one exception. I love Mortal Kombat 2. Played the shit out of the Genesis version. I had the 32X. Played the shit out of the 32X version. But I still had to have the Super Nintendo version of Mortal Kombat 2. Not because it was better. By and large, I would say they weren't equal. The Super Nintendo version was better in some ways. And the Genesis and 32X versions were better in some ways. And I would say they balanced out. But the Super Nintendo had one feature I wanted that the Genesis and the 32X versions didn't. And that was 4 versus 4, I don't know what it was called, battle mode or whatever it was called. Where you would pick 4 fighters, and then your second player would pick 4 fighters, and then it was like a battle royale. I wanted to play that. Also, the Super Nintendo version, the fatalities did look a little better than the Genesis version, I'll admit, and so I wanted to see the extra, body parts and the blood and gore and guts that the Genesis version had some of, but not all of. Let's be real. Let's be frank. It's just true. So, yeah, I got Mortal Kombat 2 on the Super Nintendo. I didn't buy the Street Fighter games on the Super Nintendo because I already had Super Street Fighter on the Genesis, and I already had Special Champion Edition, and while I did get to play the Super Nintendo versions years later, y'all, Champion Edition is the definitive 16-bit home console port of Street Fighter 2. Notice I said definitive 16-bit home console port of Street Fighter 2 because, yes, I'll admit, there are better versions out there on next-gen hardware. But Super Street Fighter 2 was the same on the Genesis as it was the Super Nintendo. Indistinguishable. I didn't need to own it. But Special Champion Edition on the Genesis was the definitive version. It was basically both Super Nintendo games combined into one game. You could save money by buying it once instead of having to buy it thrice. Nintendo, Capcom. Yeah. So I didn't buy Street Fighter on the Super Nintendo. But I did get Primal Rage on the Super Nintendo, even though I already had it on the Genesis. And that's just because I was obsessed with Primal Rage. And I was hoping... excuse me. Swallowed some spit in the wrong tunnel. I was just hoping that maybe the Super Nintendo version would be better than the Genesis version. Like Mortal Kombat 2 was, kind of. It would have some special feature or something. It didn't. It was the same game. That was a waste of money. And then I had other games. Like, eventually I got Super Ghouls and Ghosts, or Super Ghosts and Goblins. I can't remember which one it was called on the Super Nintendo. Because I already had the other one on the Genesis. But I knew it was a different game. It wasn't just the same game with the word Super in front of it. I knew it was a different game, so I bought that. And then eventually I got, like, NBA Jam, because I had that on everything, because everybody did. And then I started getting things like... I started digging into the weeds a little bit. I got Final Fantasy III. Great game. At the urging of everybody who had a Super Nintendo, which wasn't everybody I knew, but the people who did, at the urging of those assholes, I bought Chrono Trigger and ripped a lot of my hair out, getting frustrated at that piece of garbage. I don't hate Chrono Trigger. It's a fantastic game, I'll admit. It's not for me. I did not enjoy playing it. Is it rubbish? Not in the traditional sense, but in the sense that, to me, I can't enjoy it. It's rubbish to me. I'm not a fan of Chrono Trigger. I'm not sorry. But like I said, I also had Super Mario RPG at the time. I had Kirby Superstar, Super Mario All-Stars, Mario Kart. I had F-Zero, and a bunch of other games I can't even remember. Because at this point, I was building my Super Nintendo collection alongside my Genesis collection. And then I also had the 32X. And then, alright, now I've got a good 60 to 70 Super Nintendo games, a good 70 to 80 Genesis games. I've got a good solid collection. I've got the 32X. I picked up a Game Boy Pocket along the way, and a Super Game Boy on my Super Nintendo. So I have a small stack about this big of random Game Boy games. None of them worth a shit. I was never into Pokemon, so the Game Boy was not my forte. I would have rather had a Game Gear, but they had already discontinued it by this time. It had been clearanced. Nobody was selling the games, and they weren't popping up in the used game stores or the pawn shops or the thrift stores because nobody bought the damn thing, so nobody was getting rid of it because nobody had it to get rid of. So I never had a Game Gear up to this point. Sorry. I was not interested in the Saturn. I did want a PlayStation, but the Dreamcast just came out. So now the Dreamcast is out. The N64 is out there. I'm not playing it because I have a Genesis and a Super Nintendo. The PS2 is about to come out and the GameCube's around the corner. What do? Well, in 2000, September, I have a real job now because I'm 18, or about to turn 18. I'm 17. I've left high school behind because I dropped out. No, not yet. I hadn't dropped out yet. I dropped out the next year. So this was my last year in high school. 17. It was my last year in high school. It was 2000. My 18th birthday. I've got a wad of cash. I've been saving up my paychecks. I've been saving up my tips because I worked in a restaurant. Now I had money. Like, real money. I had almost $1,000 in 2000 money. For a 17-year-old, that's a lot of money. My parents are trying to get me to put that into CDs. Not compact discs, but I mean certificates of deposit. They were trying to get me to invest my money so that I could grow it, and I was like, nah, I want to buy video games. So we went to the Software Etc. in the mall because it wasn't a GameStop yet. Eventually, it would become a GameStop, which it is still to this day. But at that time, it was a Software Etc. So I went into the Software Etc. and I bought 2 systems, 3 games each. And yes, it took all my money. I bought a Sony PlayStation with Final Fantasy 3, Final Fantasy 7, Tekken 3, and Crash Bandicoot. And then on the Nintendo 64, because yes, I bought an N64 that same day, I got Super Mario 64, duh, The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, duh, and Mortal Kombat Trilogy, because I had to have a Mortal Kombat game, and Trilogy was the at the time, best current home console Mortal Kombat you could get. 4 hadn't come. If it had come to home consoles, I don't know yet. Maybe it did, but I wasn't interested. I was like, Trilogy. It was the game to get. And now I had both. I had a Nintendo 64, and I had a PlayStation. Now, at this time, the year is 2000. The PS2 was just about to come. This is September 2000. The PS2 was 2 or 3 months away from coming out. And it's going to hit the scene. It's going to make a splash. But it hasn't come out yet. So PlayStation games are starting to get pretty cheap. But they're still making brand new games for the PlayStation, so they're still relatively expensive. They haven't hit the secondhand market yet, and they haven't hit the clearance bin yet. So I can start to buy PlayStation games, but not as frequently as I can Super Nintendo or Genesis games, or even 32X, because those systems are officially discontinued at this point and hitting the clearance bins. The N64, on the other hand, it was not a massive success, not a total failure, but Nintendo games have a habit of not hitting the clearance bin for whatever reason beyond human comprehension. And so, while the system was getting ready to be supplanted by the GameCube, it hadn't happened yet, it was still a year away, Nintendo was still marketing and making games for the N64 and trying to get people to buy it, which I just did. By the way, both of the consoles I bought were used, because I had to save money, you know. Because I also had to buy a memory card for the... I had to buy a memory card for the PlayStation because it was worthless without it. And I had to buy a memory card and a second controller for the N64. Because even though I didn't have multiplayer games, my friends did. They all had Mario Kart and Smash Brothers and Mario Party and everything else. So I was going to borrow games from my friends or invite them to my house to play games on my Nintendo 64. So I had to have controllers. Now I was only able to buy one second controller because, again, I had about $1,000 to spend, but that's not going to go very far in 2000 when you're buying games at a game store in the mall. But I got what I got. Slowly, I would start to pick up PlayStation games. I got Mortal Kombat Trilogy on the PlayStation, even though I already had it on the N64, because I played it at a friend's house, and I just knew it was the better version, because I got to play it myself. I ended up getting Castlevania Symphony of the Night, Gran Turismo, and then Gran Turismo 2, Tomb Raider, which I never played. Didn't enjoy it. Gex, because I wanted a 3DO, and this was as close as I could get to experiencing the 3DO. And then I got other random stuff like Vigilante 8 or Tetris Plus, the Asteroids game that was on the PlayStation, some of those Namco museums, Midway, Williams, Atari collections, and so on and so forth. And then on the Nintendo 64, I was buying Star Wars, Shadows of the Empire. I think it was called Rogue Squadron. So I had those two games. I had Nightmare Creatures. Not a good game, but I played it. I bought Doom 64 because why not? And Quake. I think it was Quake 2. I can't remember. It was one of the Quakes that was on the N64. I bought Cruis'n USA, Killer Instinct Gold. Game sucked, by the way. And then I started to realize something. I was having a hard time finding games I wanted to buy on the N64. Because I was having a hard time finding games I wanted to play on the N64. I was getting to the point where I was like, I made a mistake buying this thing. Yeah, I would pick up Mario Party and Mario Kart and Smash Brothers and Paper Mario and Donkey Kong 64, which, not a fan of Donkey Kong 64, by the way. And then I would pick up, eventually Star Fox 64, which, again, is just Super Nintendo Star Fox with a prettier paint job. The game kind of sucks. I'm sorry. I'm not a Star Fox isn't my jam. I'm sorry. And then I would get other random games just for the hell of it, like Jet Force Gemini, or Glover, or I can't remember what it was called. It was like Space Circus or something like that. I can't remember what it was called, but it was this weird game that was kind of fun, but also, kind of convoluted. And then I had the Beast Wars Transmetals fighting game, or whatever it was. Then I had a bunch of games on PlayStation, but I was slowly building up my PlayStation collection as well. But I was starting to realize I wasn't into the Tony Hawks and the Madden of it all. I didn't care for Tomb Raider. I had negative interest in Grand Theft Auto. I really wasn't sold on the wrestling games or the racing games. So I was having a hard time finding games I wanted to play on both systems, N64 and PlayStation. So I did the unthinkable. I took my Nintendo 64 into the used video game store, and I traded it in for a bunch of Genesis and Super Nintendo and 32X games. And then I sold my PlayStation to a friend with all my PS1 games. And I used that money to buy a Sega Saturn, because I'm an idiot, and wanted to start collecting for the Saturn because I thought, hey, it's past tense, it's discontinued, you know, the games are going to start to get cheaper. Oops, I was wrong. That didn't happen. And then 2001 came along. I'd already gotten rid of my Nintendo 64, so I was skipping. I was not impressed. The N64 didn't do it for me. The PlayStation I would have kept for Final Fantasy VII and Symphony of the Night and Tekken 3 and a couple other games, but I wanted to try the Saturn because again they were still equals, relatively speaking, in terms of capabilities. I wanted to try the Sega games, so I got Bug, Clockwork Knight, Panzer Dragoon, Sonic 3D Blast, even though I had it on Genesis. And the PC version, by the way. Because I was buying games on PC at the time, too, but that's not important. Because I actually had an actual desktop computer now. But, I was starting to realize that the Saturn wasn't really doing it for me either. Yeah, I had Virtua Fighter. I had Revolution X. I had, I think it was X-Men Children of the Atom. I think it was. I had Virtua Fighter, Virtua Fighter 2, Fighters Megamix, Fighting Vipers. So I was... Oh, and Nights into Dreams. I was... and Daytona USA. I was exploring the Saturn, but I wasn't having a good time doing so. Not just because, one, every time I would get a game that was hyped, that was supposed to be good, turns out, not that good. Two, it was hella hard to find the goddamn games because, spoiler alert, nobody bought the fucking Saturn, which means there was no secondhand market because the thing didn't exist because nobody bought the fucking thing outside of Japan. Three, if you did find a game, it was either A, the 37th copy of World Series Baseball that you weren't going to buy because you already had 3 copies of it because you kept buying it because it was the guy was like, this is the only Saturn game I have to sell. Fuck it, I gotta buy something so he knows there's a market, air quotes, so when someone else trades in games, he'll buy them so I can buy them. Bad logic, but yeah, I had 3 copies of World Series Baseball because, Jesus Christ, I'm an idiot. And so is Sega, and so is anybody that bought a Saturn. I'm sorry, if you bought a Saturn, you're an idiot. If you have a Saturn today, you're still an idiot. You're an idiot. The thing is a piece of rubbish. Get over it. But even worse, if you did come across a good game, Mortal Kombat Trilogy, Tomb Raider, Gex, these aren't great games, but this is the best you're going to get. That Mortal Kombat Trilogy that I paid $15 for at Software Etc. in the mall in 2000 on the PlayStation was $90 on the Saturn. The same goddamn game. That Tomb Raider that I paid like 12 something at the used game store up the street downtown. That same game, $45 on the Saturn. Gex that I practically got for nothing because they were giving it away. It was like $3 used. Because the guy was just like, take it off my hands, I don't want it. Was like $60 on the Saturn. Fuck you, Sega. And this was where my animosity towards Sega, and I plastered it onto Sony. What happened in my psyche was Sony put Sega out of business, essentially, or put them out of the console market and forced them to go third party, which those first, 5 or 6 years of Sega being third party were rough. And I didn't want that to happen to Nintendo. I didn't enjoy the N64 at all. But the GameCube wasn't out yet. I had to sell my Saturn because it was garbage. And if you like the Saturn, it's garbage. I'm not saying you're garbage. I'm just saying you're stupid and it's garbage. It's okay to be stupid. There's nothing wrong with being stupid. Just own it. Because if you like the Saturn, you have to be stupid. That's the only explanation. I'm sorry. But I got rid of the piece of shit Saturn. Bought a Sega CD because, again, I'm stupid. I've admitted it multiple times. I bought a 32X, for God's sake. I bought a Saturn, for God's sake. And here I am buying a Sega CD. What's wrong with my brain? Well, I don't know. I just wanted to try it out. Let's just say I had that Sega CD for all of 4, maybe 5 months, and then I got rid of it. I ended up picking up a Master System somewhere along the way. Never even hooked it. I had it for years. Never even bothered to turn it on. Ended up selling it at a random yard sale. Just take it. I don't even want it. But Nintendo is like, well, they do still make good games. Mario 64 was a legit good game, and so was Ocarina of Time. Majora's Mask is Donkey Dicks. Or Donkey Balls, excuse me. Donkey Kong 64 is, Donkey Balls. Banjo-Kazooie, more Donkey Balls. I'm sorry, guys. The N64 has a lot of Donkey Balls. Same with 007. You know what game I'm talking about. That game sucks fucking cockroaches. And I'm not going to apologize. And you know what? GoldenEye is goddamn shit. I've always hated that game. I will always hate that game. And I will not be polite or friendly to people that tell me it's a good game. No, it's not. Fuck you! I hate GoldenEye. Don't even talk to me about the legacy and all that god. I don't give a fuck. Fuck that game. Fuck you if you like it. Shut the fuck up. I hate that game. I'm not talking about it anymore. But again, the GameCube's not out yet. What do? I go back to the game store and I buy back the N64 I just traded in a couple of months ago. And I start buying back the N64 games that I did like. So instead of having 50 to 60 N64 games because I was invested and I was trying to build a collection, I started weeding out the games that I figured out sucked. This time around, I didn't have that many games. Yeah, I still had Mortal Kombat Trilogy and Mortal Kombat 4 because I was obsessed with Mortal Kombat. I still had Super Mario 64 and Paper Mario. Didn't waste my time with Smash Brothers because I didn't enjoy it. I bought it. I wasn't impressed, okay? I wasn't impressed. And then I picked up Mario Party again. I wasn't going to waste my money on the rare shit. I wasn't going to waste the rare shit, I should specify. I wasn't going to waste my money on the racing games or the wrestling games or the sports games. I wasn't going to waste my money on anything South Park because I vehemently hate South Park, so I don't care if it's a good game, it's South Park, I'm not playing it. I'm not going to buy Majora's Mask again because I hated it. That was a miserable fucking experience. Fuck you, Nintendo. And this is the only time I'll ever say this. Ever. Fuck you, Miyamoto, for allowing Majora's Mask to exist. Okay? And fuck you, Hiroshi Yamauchi, for greenlighting that piece of shit. And fuck you, anyone that likes Majora's Mask. Fuck you, I hate that game. Okay? So I didn't buy that one. And I did buy back Rogue Squadron, because that was a fun game. But I didn't buy back Shadows of the Empire, because that wasn't a great game. I did not buy back Jet Force Gemini, or that Space, whatever it was called, game, or Glover, because those weren't great games. I didn't buy back Castlevania, because that game sucked. Castlevania 64, as it's known as. So now I've got, 5 games on the N64. But I had to buy something. because I was, and then I ended up buying Kirby 64 new in box at the Walmart, or not the Walmart, the Kmart, because we still don't have a Walmart yet in this town where I lived at the time. It was 2001, maybe going on 2002. Still didn't have a Walmart in this town. The town I'm talking about, I'm not going to identify, that I lived in at the time, did not get their Walmart until 2017. At that time, they still had a Kmart. Now, today they don't. The Kmart's long gone now. But, yeah. Kmart's were, you have to remember, Kmart's were everywhere before Walmart's replaced them. It took a while. I have to reiterate that because a lot of people cannot comprehend living in a world where you can you can throw a rock and hit a Kmart but can't find a Walmart to save your life. People can't comprehend that even though it was real. I just gotta remind you because that was an actual reality. In this part of the country I lived in at the time, the Pacific Northwest, Walmart hadn't really broken into the market yet. They were still concentrated on the eastern and southern parts of the U.S. and the central parts of the U.S. They were making their way out west, but it wasn't like their main focus, because you have to remember, at that time, and probably still today, although it's probably different, at that time they had a rule. They didn't build a Walmart too far from a distribution center, and they're not going to build a distribution center in the least densely populated part of the country. They're not that stupid. They would wait until there were no more Kmart's left to come to this part of the country, because then it was like, all right, the door's open. And you got to remember, people had brand loyalty back then. Those Kmart shoppers they went there until the last day that Kmart had its doors open, until they locked their doors and turned into something else or a parking lot. Even after Walmart came to town, Kmart shoppers were loyal to the bloody end. I was one of them. I mentioned I'm an idiot multiple times. I'm not going to deny it. I bought a fucking Sega Saturn. If you buy a Sega Saturn, you're an idiot by default. I bought a Sega Saturn. I'm not going to say you're an idiot for buying one, but I'm not. If you buy a Sega Saturn, you're an idiot. That's not debatable. I'm sorry. I was an idiot and bought the piece of shit. By the way, I never spent the astronomically outrageous money on Panzer Dragoon Saga. I did watch a Let's Play on YouTube when that became a thing, and I did download the emulator and tried it. That game sucks. Stop trying to make it a thing. It sucks. The reason Sega doesn't remaster it and sell it isn't because there's no market for it because people hate Sega. There's no market for it because people have watched the Let's Plays and have figured out that the game is garbage. There's no point in remastering it. It's not going to sell a goddamn copy. Limited run games would go out of business if they invested and partnered with Sega trying to bring that game back. There's no market for that shit. Shut up. It sucks. Get over it. Now that I've hammered that home and beat that dead horse into dust, let's move on. So now it's 2002. God damn it, I dropped my mouse. I gotta pick it up because I might accidentally hit the X. Alright, so now it's 2002. At home, I've reacquired an NES because nostalgia has kicked in. I'm in my 20s. I've got the Genesis. I've got the Sega CD for who knows. I'm holding on to the 32X. I'm holding out hope that if I get a complete set of all 34 games that were released in the US, maybe it'll make me happy and cure my depression. Yeah, it didn't. And I never did, by the way. And I still have, I still have my reacquired N64. I still have my Super Nintendo. I still have my Game Boy collection. So I decided to buy something new. I buy a Game Boy Advance, not a GameCube. The GameCube's out. It exists. But I'm looking at the games. And I'm not sold. I don't want to play Luigi's Mansion. I tried the demo of Mario Sunshine. I wasn't impressed. And don't get me started on Super Monkey Ball. Don't even... just don't ask, okay? I will pop a vein if I talk about that game. But I want to support Nintendo because I don't want them to go out of business like Sega did, because I don't want Microsoft in the market. And if Nintendo goes away, we're going to be stuck with Sony and Microsoft. And oops, we already live in that world, even though Nintendo technically still exists. We're going to get to that later. But I had a lot of fun with the Super Nintendo. I loved it. Eventually, it overtook my love of the Genesis. And now, today, I appreciate it more. And I will say today, I think the Super Nintendo is a better system than the Sega. Back then, I would have actually gotten a fist fight with you over that. Because I was, like, adamant the Sega was better. You know, a couple of 100% completes of Super Mario RPG and Donkey Kong Country is all it took to enlighten me on the truth, okay? And eventually, Super Mario World would become, to this day, my favorite video game of all time. Even more than Minecraft. And y'all know I am obsessed with Minecraft. I've even got a Minecraft Let's Play channel that I need to reevaluate because, you know, I lost my saves because my laptop died. But I'll get to it eventually. I'll figure it out. But I digress. Maybe I can link my PS4 up to my account and... Nah, I don't... That's a whole hassle. Anyways, I love Minecraft, but Super Mario World is still my favorite game of all time, and nothing's ever going to change that. Because I play that game 30, 40 times a year. And even though I'm obsessed with Minecraft, when I do play Mario World, I enjoy my time more than I do with Minecraft is just a way to pass the time. Super Mario World is a way to get joy in your life. Does that make sense? So at this point, I've got a pretty good collection of games and systems. I've tried some of the odd systems, you know, like the Sega CD and the Saturn and the, you know, I picked up a Master System and then got rid of it just as quick. You know, so I've still got a pretty dedicated gaming PC at the time. So I pick up a Game Boy Advance because it's brand new. So I buy it new at the store. And I end up buying Super Mario Advance. I think it was the Super Mario World version. And then I got the Super Mario Bros. 2 version, but I don't remember which one I bought first. And then once it came out, I bought the other Super Mario 2 Advance games. The other Super Mario Advance games on the GBA. So I got the Yoshi's Island and then Super Mario Bros. 3E. And then I bought an e-reader. We've established I'm an idiot. I bought a Saturn, for God's sakes. Do you think I'm going to pass up the opportunity to buy an e-reader? Come on. But now I have an e-reader, and I got a Game Boy Advance. I'm starting to read the magazines that if you buy this funky-dory link cable, you can hook it up to your GameCube, and you could play games on the GameCube that connect to the GBA, and you get an all-new experience. But Nintendo went through a dark time in 2002. They discontinued the GameCube in 2002. People forget this. They stopped manufacturing new GameCubes. Maybe it was 2000. I think it was summer of 2003. They just cold turkey stopped making new GameCubes. Slashed the price to $99. Bundled it with the Legend of Zelda Collector's Disc, and there were a couple other bundles. Relaunched it a few months later in new packaging with a new bundle at a new price point to try to, you know, take the electrical thingies and zap its heart and bring it back to life. Spoiler alert, they weren't successful. It was a corpse that they were just, you know, feeding nutrients into it with from the life support system because they were not ready to accept the fact that it died. They were still going to put games on it. Third parties were like, nah, not interested. But I wanted a game. I wanted to support Nintendo because I didn't want... I loved Mario and Zelda sometimes. There were some Zelda games that didn't hit with me, but there were more that did. By the way, I was not impressed with Luigi's Mansion or Mario Sunshine, and I was not at all gonna even bother with Wind Waker because I played the demo because I got my GameCube in December of 2003, and I also bought, because the one I bought came with the Zelda Collector's Disc, so I got the 20-minute demo of the Wind Waker. Yuck. And then I also got Sonic Adventure DX, Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance. Despite my knowing the game wasn't going to be good because I played the demo, I still bought Luigi's Mansion, and I still bought Mario Sunshine, because I wanted to go all in. And I started buying other games on the GameCube, games like, Dr. Muto, and Hunter the Reckoning, and Future Tactics, and games you've never heard of and never played because it was a GameCube. And I bought Wario World because we've established I'm an idiot. I'm gonna own it. If you're an idiot, own it. Don't try to deny it, just accept it. There's nothing wrong with it, just admit it and get over it. Just try to learn from your mistakes. I bought a Saturn, and what did I do? I followed that up with buying a goddamn e-reader. Did I learn from my mistakes? No, I didn't. I kept making mistakes. Because you know what else I bought at that time? I had the GameCube, and I was loading up on games. I'd walked away from PlayStation. At this point, I had vitriolic animosity towards PlayStation. I refused to buy a PS2. I was never gonna buy an Xbox. I kept telling myself, no, not interested. I have no use for Halo or the 25,000 Halo clones that make up 100% of the piece of shit Xbox library, and you're never gonna convince me otherwise. It's literally Halo and Nalo and Balo and everything else. Fuck you, Xbox. Fucking Microsoft. Get out of the games industry, Microsoft. You're not welcome. Nobody wants you. Go away. But now I have a GameCube. I'm all in. I've got the link cable. I've got the e-reader. I've got the Game Boy player. I've got Final Fantasy, Crystal Chronicles, and Legend of Zelda 4 Swords Adventures. And now I'm that obnoxious kid that was trying to tell everybody, you gotta play Clue Land. It doesn't suck, I promise. Now I'm telling everybody, God damn it! Fucking move the mouse. Now I'm the one telling everybody, y'all, I'm telling you, Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles is a actual, really good Final Fantasy type game. I promise if everybody has a Game Boy and the link cable, I'm telling you, it doesn't suck. I wasn't convinced. It does suck. And then I was also like, y'all have got to try. You have got to try Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg. No, you don't. And listen, it's got the best version of Soul Calibur 2. Well, it's got Link, and it looks good and plays okay, and it's a solid game, but that controller is atrocious. The worst controller, and number one worst controller in video game history, as much as I hate the Waggle Wand, is the Trident on the N64. The second worst controller in the entire history of video games is the GameCube controller. I love the GameCube and almost everything about it, but that controller sucks. And then obviously the third worst controller is the Wii Remote. The fucking Waggle Wand. The only thing it was good for was Resident Evil 4 and Wii Sports, and that's it. But I was all in on the GameCube. I was buying new games because I had a real job now. I was working at Pizza Hut. I had a paycheck. I was getting tips. And I was living in a technically 2-bedroom apartment, but it was really the walk-in closet that we cut in half, and my sister and her roommate turned into a second bedroom. It was a big closet, but, I mean, it was big enough for a bed. But I was splitting the rent with 2 other people, so I was doing good. You know. But I was also really obsessed at this point with video games. Because remember, I'm still transgender on the inside, but I have to live like a dude on the outside because I haven't come out of the closet yet. Not safe to do so, because I'm living in Kansas at the time. And I'm not ready to make that transition yet. So, I have severe depression. I'm also bipolar, but I hadn't been diagnosed yet. But the signs were there because everybody was saying, "You're probably bipolar," and I was like, "I don't know what that means, but leave me alone." So I did the unthinkable, stupid, idiotic thing you could do, and I bought a fucking Nomad, a Sega Nomad. I could have bought a Game Gear and got to experience the rubbish that is that. Instead, I already had a Genesis Model 2. I already had a Genesis Model 1. I already had a 32X and a Sega CD Model 2 hooked up to my Genesis Model 2 because, you know. Why did I need a Nomad? Because I'm a dumbass. Alright, so now I can play Dungeons & Dragons Warriors of the Eternal Sun on a itty-bitty screen. Why? Beats me. But I'm all in on the GameCube. So, I bought my GameCube in December of 2003. By, I'm going to say May of 2005, I had at least 80 games on the GameCube. I'm talking Wave Race and Tony Hawk's. I had 3 or 4 Need for Speed games. I had all of the Mario parties that came out as they came out. I had Smash Brothers Melee. I had Double Dash. I bought Wind Waker despite my best judgment. Even though it gives me an aneurysm thinking about it, I bought Super Monkey Ball 2 because we've established. I don't have to say it again. And I had Star Fox Adventures and Metroid Prime and Echoes and, you know, all of the games. I had Gun, I had 13, I had Geist, I had Odama, which, look. Kirby's Air Ride, I had all of the games. I even had a couple of Maddens, and some Rogue Squadrons and others, and some wrestling games, and all of the 007s. Agent Under Fire, and Rogue Agent, and From Russia with Love, and everything else. If it came out on the GameCube, and it was on the front cover of a magazine, didn't matter if it was Game Informer, or Nintendo Power, or whatever. If it was on the front cover of a magazine, and it was on the GameCube, I bought it. If it was at the used video game store, and it was under $30, I bought it. And then, I did the unthinkable. Because I loved the GameCube. I'm going to admit, I actually was having fun, just like I was having fun with the Super Nintendo. Despite not wanting to get back into Nintendo, I did, and I was enjoying it. Because the N64 never did. So, what did I do? I sold my Nomad. I sold my NES. I sold my Genesis, the whole lot. The Sega CD, the 32X. I sold the Super Nintendo. I sold the Nintendo 64. I sold everything that wasn't the Nintendo GameCube and the Game Boy Advance, the e-reader, and all its accessories. I was all in. That was it. I planted my flag. I'm Nintendo now. And I loved it. By the way, I'm amassing a ginormous collection of GameCube games, mostly AAA titles. I had all 3 of the Prince of Persias. I'm telling you, if it was on the GameCube, and it was a game you were supposed to buy, I bought it. I was all in on the GameCube. But I was equally all in on the GBA. I had 2 GBAs. I had the white one and the purple one. You had to have 2 and 2 link cables to get the most out of the connectivity that it had with the GameCube. So, yeah. Well, I had to, twist her arm to get my sister to play Crystal Chronicles with me. But I had to experience that game as a multiplayer game because the magazines told me to. Well, it was not an experience I got to have very often because she refused to repeat it. Because the game was not a fun time for anybody. None of the connectivity games turned out to be any good. It was a gimmick. And this is really when I started to hear people call Nintendo the company of gimmicks. No, I was not. I was blinded by the... Sony put Sega out of business. I can't let that happen to Nintendo. Mario, Zelda, Metroid, Star Fox Adventures were good games, and there's some other good... Pikmin was a good game. So I'm in the... I can't let Nintendo go out of business because Microsoft has entered the chat, and Sony is the fucking six-headed Hydra. So we can't let them kill itty-bitty little Hobbit Nintendo. We can't. They're not going to slay the Hydra. They're not going to slay the dragon, the fire red ancient silver dragon that is the Xbox, the Microsoft. So we got to throw all of our support behind this itty-bitty little Hobbit from Japan because we have no choice. I bought Wario World. Wario World. Yeah. But there were a lot of duds on the GameCube, I'm not going to lie. Konga, Jungle Beat, Batten Kaitos, Path of Radiance, Gale of Dark. Those games all suck. You're never, ever going to tell me otherwise. I played them. Fuck nuts. Batten Kaitos. Go lick a donkey's asshole, you piece of shit. That game sucks. It shouldn't have got a sequel. I wish it was forgotten. No, it's not a forgotten hidden gem. It's forgotten for a fucking reason. Leave it forgotten. And if you haven't forgot it yet, try to forget it. Batten Kaitos. Fuck off. Game sucks. And yeah, I bought Chibi Robo and, pretty much everything but Animal. Animal Crossing was where I drew the line. That's where I drew the line. To this day, I'm still... Pokemon? Not interested. Animal Crossing makes my skin crawl. It's so disgusting to me. I look at it and I'm like, ew. Why do people like it? It just... Ugh. I'm not into Animal Crossing. I'm not sorry. I have pity for those who are into it. But like what you like. Just don't ask me to not hate it. I'ma hate it all day long. But I'm gonna keep my hate to myself because y'all don't care. But I hate Animal Crossing in all of its iterations. Never played the fucking thing. I refuse. It makes my skin crawl. Fucking Animal. Not interested. I have no use for it. And yeah, I had the 1,000-Year Door, even though it wasn't a great game. But something happened in 2005. Sony has now got the PSP on the market, and I'm terrified. All my friends are buying PSPs. None of them are interested in the Nintendo DS. They're making fun of Nintendo for the DS. They're making fun of the DS. And they're actually making fun of me for not only wanting one, but trying to talk them into it. Uh-oh. Am I about to be an idiot again and buy another Nintendo console that I'm going to regret? Is this the next Nintendo 64? I buy a Nintendo DS on launch day. On launch day. They didn't even have any games yet. I mean, I had Tetris DS, and I got Mario Kart DS, and then Mario 64 DS, and Electroplankton, because again, I'm a dumbass. And then when it comes out, I get New Super Mario Brothers, and finally I take a sigh of relief. I made a good decision. This thing's actually legit good. Not just accidentally good like the GameCube, which I love it, but let's be honest. The machine, poorly designed, got lucky with a handful of good games. Pretty solid experience when you combine it with the Game Boy player and the link cable and the GBA and the e-reader. A lot of gimmicks and all of that mouthful of bullshit I just said. But they're fun. Right? Right? No. They're not $700 fun for you assholes that want to buy a GameCube today. Don't waste your money. It's not worth it. But they were fun for the time? Question mark. But I bought a DS at launch, and I'm Camp Nintendo. I am registered on multiple Nintendo fan forums. Nintendo Live, Go Nintendo, Planet GameCube, which wasn't called Nintendo World Report yet. It was still Planet GameCube. And others. And other general gaming sites where I just go to the Nintendo specific section. You know, Reddit doesn't exist yet, so we go to the Nintendo subreddit on the other video game forums. It's modern vernacular for what we would have called it back in the day. The Nintendo forums. In any website, StarWars.com, DVD Forum, Transform, Unicron.com, Cybertron.com spelled the Japanese way. Any of these fan sites that had a community section that I was a part of, I would find the general chat or the video game chat or the Nintendo specific chat and just obsessively chat and argue with everybody over Nintendo stuff all day long while I'm building up my GameCube collection still, and my GBA collection still, and my classic Game Boy and Game Boy Color games because they're compatible with the Game Boy Player and the GBA. And I'm slowly starting to build a nice Nintendo DS selection. And Nintendo, we don't read the magazines anymore. Now we're reading articles on the web. We're watching YouTube videos, because YouTube, well, not YouTube videos, but we're watching IGN videos and Screw Attack and Planet GameCube and whoever's doing the videos. Probably Screw Attack at this point in time. Most likely. Maybe GameSpot or 1UP had a video. The rest in peace, 1UP. You are missed. I know you've been reborn as Giant Bomb, but Giant Bomb is not 1UP. Okay? It's not. It's not the same. But, it is what it is. Shit happens. Speaking of shit happens, Nintendo decided we are no longer the powerhouse gaming company that you have grown up with. Now we're going to shrink into this little niche gimmick box and chase after the grandmas. And they designed the Wii. Now, before we get into, you can hear it in my tone, I have animosity towards the Wii today. But back then, in 2005, when they were announcing the revolution at the time, I was reading about it in digital magazines, websites, 1UP, etc., and watching the videos and arguing with people, scouring the forums looking for any piece of information that could be verified. Desperately waiting for the GameCube 2 to come out, or they were calling it the Revolution, but we all knew it was going to be GameCube 2. That we were wrong. But every piece of information made my stomach go, uh-oh. Uh-oh. I need some heartburn. I need some Tums. I'm getting heartburn. And eventually, they start announcing information that makes me go, the Tums aren't going to cut it. I need some Pepto. And then now the Pepto's not enough. I need some Mylanta. Nintendo, what are you doing to me? Nintendo, what are you doing? What do you mean it's not going to have a hard drive like everybody else does? What do you mean it's not going to be high definition like everybody else? What do you mean it's not going to have a powerful CPU and a modern GPU like everybody else does? What do you mean it's going to have weird TV channels for the Dewey instead of an actual proper Dewey like everybody else does? What do you mean it's only going to have 512 gigabytes of internal storage and support SD cards up to 2 gigabytes that, by the way, you can't play games from. You have to back up to, but if you want to play them, you have to erase the space on the 512 gigabytes of flash memory and then swap it back. What are you doing, Nintendo? What are you doing? The fuck is wrong with you? How are you going to get companies to make games for your goddamn piece of shit box if it's not even high definition, it's not graphically comparable to the other guys, it has shit for RAM, it's got the worst Dewey ever designed, You're giving me an aneurysm, Nintendo. But then they reveal the secret weapon that they kept telling us was the reason they codenamed it the Revolution in the first place. The thing that was going to change gaming forever and make their Blue Ocean gamble pay off. Okay, Nintendo. It's a pool of water. I'm watching the E3 presentation. And this little white television remote flies out of the pool of water. I remember that reveal video. And some imaginary hand grabs it and does this. And then they pan over to the screen. I'm probably remembering wrong, but this is how I remember it in my brain. And the thing on the screen is moving with the... And then they go into this presentation about motion controls. And some dude you've never heard of from Sega is all excited to make a drum game. Never happens, but Nintendo does Wii Music. And somebody at Nintendo is all excited that you're going to swing this massive Thor hammer and this awesome game called Project Hammer that we're all excited for. That never happens. Get used to that looks awesome, I want to play that, and then it never comes out because Nintendo. They did that to us all throughout the GameCube. All throughout the GameCube. Don't get me started on Cameo Elements of Power. That was supposed to be a GameCube. That was supposed to be the last hurrah for the GameCube. But oops, Nintendo fucked up and let Rare out of their hands, which I'm okay with because Rare was making garbage that I wasn't interested in. Except for Star Fox Adventures and Donkey Kong Country, which were the only two games they ever made in their entire history. Come at me. Well, okay. They had a hand in Killer Instinct, but I don't know how much it was them. Plus, Midway was involved, Nintendo was involved, so I'm not going to give them the full credit for KI, but they had a hand in KI. But I blame them for Banjo-Kazooie and Conker's Not Good But Very Bad Fur Day. Fuck Rare, you're not missed. Microsoft got burned in that, by the way. No, they actually did, because they found out real quick. Oops. Rare was only good when they could play in Nintendo's sandbox. Uh-oh. Well, haha, Sony, fuck you. But also, Nintendo, I don't play Rare games, but everybody else does. What are you gonna sell? What are you gonna do? And then they unveil Wii Sports. And all of a sudden, I'm not gonna lie. I can go back and show you my chats. As I'm watching this in real time, I'm chatting on the was Planet GameCube forums, now Nintendo World Report forums. And all of a sudden I'm like, guys, they won the console war. They just won the console war. Like, hands down, everyone's gonna want this thing. As soon as I saw Wii Sports in motion, I was like, no, my mom is going to play this. My grandma's going to play this. My aunts are going to play this. Your grandma's moms and aunts are going to play this. Everyone's going to buy this fucking thing, and we're all going to have Wii parties. We didn't know they were going to make a game called Wii Party, but I knew this is it. This is Nintendo's ace that they've been holding on to. They just played the ace card. Everybody else is playing 2s and 3s. They just won the hand. They won. This is it. Game over. Xbox, you're finished. Sony, try again next time. And that happened. It actually happened. I stood in line in the cold of winter on a dead-ass weekend in the middle of nowhere at a Kmart. Not lying, because Kmart was still a thing then, and yes, the town I lived in still didn't have a Walmart. To be the first in line in my town to buy a Wii. And I took it home, and I played it for a couple of hours, and then I made the mistake of showing it to my mom, and boy was I right. She confiscated the Wii, took it to the living room, showed it to brought all her church friends over, and I never saw the thing again. Okay, that's not true, but no, she played it more than I did. And what did I do? Because I wanted to like the Wii. I liked Wii Sports, I'm not going to lie. And I did play Resident Evil 4, the Wii edition, and Metroid Prime 3, and I was like, alright, this is... Alright, and I got Call of Duty 3 on the Wii, and I'm like, okay, Nintendo, alright, I'm in. I'm here for it. And then I did the dumbest thing I've ever done in my entire life. To this day, I regret doing this. I took my GameCube and all of my GameCube accessories, e-reader, link cables, the microphone, the steering wheel, the Game Boy player, and almost 100 games, at least 75 to 85 games, and my Game Boy Advance, and stacks of GB Color and GB Advance games. I took it all to Hastings. Remember Hastings? And I traded it in to Hastings. And I took that money that I got from Hastings, and I went to Shopko, of all places, because we didn't have a Walmart yet, but we still had a Kmart, and we had a Shopko. And I bought as many Wii games as I could buy. Blazing Aero Blazers, or whatever the fuck it was called. Blazing... I don't know, something Blazing Airplanes. I don't remember what it was called. And then some kind of dungeon crawler game, Dragons or something, I don't remember. Red Hot Dragon or something. I don't remember these games. I bought them. And yes, We Play and Excite Truck, excuse me. And just like fucking whatever. I scooped up as many Wii games as they had, and I took them home, and I started trying them out. And then I finally got to Mario Galaxy, and I got to Twilight Princess, because I really wanted to play Twilight Princess. And I'm playing, because I bought the GameCube version, which I just sold because I'm an idiot, and now I have the Wii version, because, alright, I'm all in on the Wii. Let's go. Let's go. I have to support Nintendo, because Microsoft isn't going away, and I don't want them to go and turn into Sega. And it looked like that was going to happen during the GameCube era, and not going to lie, spoilers, it kind of looked like that might happen again during the Wii U era, but we haven't got there yet. But I knew the Wii was going to be a success. You know how I knew the Wii was going to be a success before it came out? All my Nintendo hater friends that bought Xbox 360s, PS3s, PS2s, Xbox, made fun of me for having a GameCube, made fun of me for having a DS and a GBA because they bought PSPs. Every single one of them was hyped for the Wii. These are people that hate Nintendo, that mock Nintendo, that actively think Nintendo is garbage and not worth their time, and they're running around town trying to get their hands on a Wii. No, I knew that thing was going to be a success, and I was excited for it. Alright, Nintendo's going to get all the third-party support, and they're going to make all the great games, and if it gets made on Xbox, it's coming to the... or PlayStation or PC, it's coming to the Wii. They might have to make sacrifices, but that's okay. Well, we got darts. We got cricket. We got Wii backyard games. And we got Cabela's Who Gives a Fuck. 300 different versions of that game. And we got some inferior Call of Duties, let's say. And some Lego trash. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Now we're getting Wii Darts Pro Edition? And we're getting Hacky Sack? And fucking Cornhole? And Nintendo! What did you do? You fucking assholes! I told you not putting a hard drive in this thing and not making it high definition was going to cost you games. Yeah, you won the generation in sales, but you lost your audience. You lost the gamers. And you lost all respect in the gaming community. Because you could walk into any dollar store in the country and find Wii Darts 37 plus Wii Shake a Box. I don't fucking know. There's 10,000 games on the Wii and they all suck. Don't even get me started on Mario Galaxy. Alright, I'm ready to play. I want to jump. Whoops. Oh, my hand hurts. Whoops. Oh, I gotta grab that thingy. Oh my god, I can't do this anymore. My arm is getting cramped. Fuck you, Nintendo. Give me a controller with buttons and a joystick. Well, they did. They gave me a Wii U. We've established I'm an idiot. You know I bought the fucking thing. Because I did. And at this point, I'm under Nintendo's spell. And is it going to be broken? We'll see. But we'll see after these messages, because I need a drink from not a sponsor. Alright, we're back. Okay. Alright. I bought the Wii U. And I'm loving Super Mario 3D World. Alright, this is... Nintendo, this is how you make Mario games. Don't you ever try to force that waggle wand on me again. You assholes. Yeah, my system came with Nintendo Land, and I took it out of the box. I took the Wii U home, opened it up, took it out of the box, Nintendo Land, took it straight to GameStop, said, I don't want it. What will you give me for it? He pointed at the shelf. He had 70 copies, and he's like, I'm sorry, I'll take it, but I can give you 25 cents for it. And I said, you know what? Take it. I don't want your quarter. I don't want this game, and I left. And I'm telling the truth, that's exactly what I did. And that's what everybody else did with Nintendo Land. But I bought Hyrule Warriors, Captain Toad, Splatoon, NES Remix 1 and 2, Mario Maker, Wind Waker HD, which was like, Twilight Princess HD, which was like, yay, finally I can play this game without waggle. Woohoo! Could have on the GameCube if I hadn't sold it like a dumbass, but here we are. And then I got that Donkey Kong Mario March of Minis or whatever the fuck it was called, and Wonderful 101, and Bayonetta 1 and 2, and oh, I'm all in on the Wii U. Remember, at this point, even though I shit on the Wii, and even though I hate the Wii today, and I'll never go back, I still had the thing throughout its entire generation, and I still kept trying to buy games for it and find something that wasn't Wii Darts. Wii Darts Backyard Alley, Wii Darts Pub Edition. Jesus Christ! Goddamn Wii. Fuck you, Nintendo. Fuck you. So I sold my DS along the way, but I sold my DS to buy USB hard drives because I had discovered, shall we say, fishing for movies on the internet, and leave it there. Alright. But, I digress. Okay, so I got the Wii U. And because, as is what I do, I sold everything else I had to funnel my funds into buying Wii U games. Because I gotta have something to play on the damn thing. And I got lucky. I bought my Wii U Deluxe Edition that came with Nintendo Land, and it was also came bundled with New Super Mario Brothers U and New Super Luigi U bundle. It was a mega bundle that also gave you bonus coins for buying games in the eShop. So I got the coins because I gave them all the serial numbers that I still had for my DS and my Wii and my Wii U and my Nintendo Land. Not Nintendo Land because I didn't open it up. I'm sorry. That was a lie. But everything else, they came with little cards that had codes on them, and I put in the codes, and I collected all these coins. And because you got double coins, because I bought a special edition deluxe version for a limited time that gave you, it was like 6 months of double points. I redeemed all my points and went to the Virtual Console, and the first thing I did was ported over all my Wii games that I could that existed over to the Wii U Virtual Console, so I didn't have to load Wii Mode and use a Wii Remote, the Waggle Wand, to play those games. Alright, Nintendo. And then I was buying games on the eShop like DuckTales Remastered and the Dungeons & Dragons Tower of Mystara collection and Pierre Solar, The Great Architects, and blah 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 blah. Alright, I'm having fun. Actually, I'm seriously, I'm loving the Wii U. I would like it to have more games. I would like it to have better games. But I'm okay with what it's getting because it's not shoving waggle wand shovelware down my throat. Oh, it still existed. But it didn't take long for that market to dry up because people were like, oh, yeah, the Wii U's a total failure. No one's buying our rubbish. So it didn't take long for the rubbish to disappear. And then you started getting things like Zombie U and Lego City Undercover and Rayman Legends and Sonic whatever the fuck it was called. Alright, I'm here, Nintendo. I'll play in your sandbox for a couple more years. But something else happened. The 3DS came on the scene, and it was a $300 handheld? Nintendo, go to hell. I'm not buying that piece of shit. Never did. I've never owned a 3DS to this day. It may have had some good games, but I'll never know because it never came down to a reasonable price. Fuck you, Nintendo. And I was already overpaying for the Wii U and the Wii U games at this point. And yes, overpaying. Because you know what I was doing? Buying, like I did on the GameCube, every game that came out. Yeah, I had Darksiders 2. I had Pikmin 3, which is a good game. I had Donkey Kong Country Returns Tropical Freeze. Good game. Whatever, Yarn Yoshi or whatever the fuck it was called. Not a good game. At all. But I bought it because I had to. Because I had to have everything. Because I didn't want it. Because I saw the writing on the wall. This is Nintendo's Dreamcast moment. Are they gonna go the Sega route and become a third-party company? Or are they gonna exit the console market and double down on the handheld market? Well, looking at the 3DS and the 2DS and the new, all the different variations of 2DS, 3DS, etc., and looking at the fact that the Wii U came with a gamepad, a tablet, and the iPad had been a massive success, and the Galaxy had been a massive success, I was thinking they're going to make a tablet next. Like, just a gaming tablet. It'll have buttons and joysticks on the side, but it's going to be a tablet you hook up to your TV, and it's going to have all of them. All the games. The handheld games, the console games. Every Nintendo internal first-party developer will be making 100% of their software library on the tablet. They have to. This is the only thing they can do. This is the only play they can make that's going to keep them alive. And I have forum discussions from 2015 and 16 and 17 repeatedly saying, guys, this is what they're going to do. They're going to make a tablet. It's probably not going to be an iPad. It's going to be some weird Nintendo thingy like the gamepad, but they're going to redesign the innards so that it can stand on its own and hook up to your TV without the console. But this is what they're going to do. They have to. They have no choice. Because they can't split. This is what they were doing. They were splitting their audience. Yeah, they smoke screened us during the Wii, but we forgot that every time a game got announced, Nintendo would be like, we've got 7 games coming out this year. Back in the GameCube days. And you'd get excited. All right, 7 Nintendo games. 3 of them are coming to the GameCube. One of them is Donkey Konga. The other one's Mario Soccer. And then if you're lucky, you get Star Fox Assault. Okay. And then the other 4 games are coming to the GBA or the Nintendo DS. Oh, well, I have a GBA and a DS, so I'm good. But we didn't do this in the Wii era. I got rid of the DS because I had to. And the Wii was, it was a struggle. But now I'm in the Wii U camp. And Nintendo says, we're going to make 5 games this year. Okay. 2 of them are going to be on the Wii U. Both of them are going to have 3DS versions. What? You're just putting 3DS games on the Wii U? What? Come again? The other games are all going to be 3DS exclusives. And those are the games you're going to want to play. Legend of Zelda, A Link Between Worlds, Luigi's Mansion 2, whatever else came out. You're like, yeah, that's the games I want. Why aren't they on the handheld? Put them on the Wii U, goddammit, we need games! The thing's got nothing! I've already bought both NES remixes. I'm not going to buy a third one. I've got Mario Maker. I've already played every version of Mario Kart. And I've already unlocked every character in Smash Brothers for the Wii U edition because they couldn't come up with a title for it. Nintendo, I'm running out of games to play. There's nothing else to buy. What else you got? Star Fox? Oh, wait. This weird robot sci-fi thing in the Star Fox universe, I guess? Question mark? I'll pass. I'm not interested. No, thank you. And then it was like, hey, we got a new Zelda game coming for the Wii U. Here's a screenshot. It's an open world Zelda. You're gonna love it. But it's not coming out for 4 years. Your consoles only have a 5-year lifespan, and it's already year 2. So that means, is it coming to the Wii U? Are you lying to us? Is this a bait and switch like you tried to do with Twilight Princess? Spoilers, yes it was. But alright, Breath of the Wild. Alright, Nintendo. When do we get Breath of the Wild? Well, actually, it's not coming out this year, but you can rebuy Wind Waker, but now in high definition. That's not what I asked for. That's not what you promised, but alright, whatever. Oh, you want to rebuy Metroid Prime? No. You want to rebuy Pikmin 1 and 2? And Mario Galaxy? No. You want to rebuy Twilight Princess, but now in HD? No. Do you want to buy this 3DS Donkey Kong game with little miniature Marios that we're putting on the Wii U because we have nothing else and it's literally the 3DS game? No. Do you want this really awesome Kirby game that looks like the best Kirby game we've ever made? Yes, please. Buy a 3DS. Fuck you! Fuck! Nintendo's a small company compared to Sony. Compared to Microsoft. They're a big company compared to Atari. But they're not the big... Financially, they're huge. But in terms of staff, they're not. They keep their staff levels under control. What that means is they only have a certain number of people making games. Now, this was not that big a deal when you could have 5 people making NES games and 12 people making Super Nintendo games and 27 people making GameCube games. But when it takes 300 people to make a Wii game, a Wii U game, and it takes like 27 people to make a 3DS game, they don't have the staff to make 12 games a year anymore. Now they're making 6 games a year, and if you're lucky, 3 of them are going to come to the Wii U, and at least one of them's just going to be a 3DS game upscaled to high definition. If you're lucky. Okay, Nintendo, I've put up with your bullshit long enough. Now you've pissed me off. I buy your stupid Mass Effect 3, even though PlayStation gamers got Mass Effect Trilogy the same fucking day. So you know what I did? I bought a PS3. And then, literally 3 months later, I bought a PS4. So now I still got the Wii U. Never gonna buy a 3DS. Even now I'm saying this to this day. Never gonna buy a 3DS. I have a GBA. I picked that up. I might get a DS again someday down the road. And maybe I'll pick up a GameCube or a Super Nintendo down the road. Maybe. Probably not. I still like Nintendo games. I still like Nintendo. But they've hurt me. Y'all. They have rubbed me the wrong way. So, alright, here comes the next generation Wii U. They better not call it the Wii 3. Oh my god, or the Wii 360. Oh my god, Nintendo, don't pull a Microsoft. Please. And they announced the NX. Or the Nintendo Cross, as some people called it. Now, they don't tell us much about it, but they're dangling the Breath of the Wild carrot in front of us, and we've already deduced that this is going to be an NX launch title. Maybe it's coming out on the Wii U too, so they can keep their promise, but it's not going to be a Wii U game. It's going to be a NX game. And then they slowly start giving us details that make us go, huh? That sounds like... Are they actually going to do what I said they were going to do? Are they actually going to make an iPad with buttons and call it a Nintendo console? Are they exiting the home console exclusive market and just going to have one machine that puts all their games? Are they really going to do that? Because that'd be great if they did, because now I can buy every game they make. I don't have to get excited for a game and find out it's coming to the handheld I don't own and not the console that I invested in. Are they going to do it? And they did. And I pre-ordered it. And I stood in line at midnight, and I went home with my brand new in-the-box Switch. And I'm going to tell you a secret. I loved it. I loved everything about it. Every game I bought on it, except for a couple of games. But I loved ARMS. I loved Odyssey. I loved Breath of the Wild. I liked Smash Brothers. You know, I was really into the Switch, excuse me. I was really into the Switch. But, unfortunately, something happened beyond my control. It was COVID. I was working in the news industry at the time, which was on shaky ground because all the advertisers who spend money to keep newspapers and local TV stations in business, well, they're shut down due to government shutdowns, lockdown mandates. They're not making money, and since they have no income, and they can't sell anything right now, they're not spending money on advertising. So people are getting laid off. This decimated the local news industry, which we have not yet recovered from. And so, I'm unemployed. Now, at this time, I own my house. It's a small RV situation out in the country. And I own my car. I have no car payment. But I do have to pay the lot rent. And I do have to pay the power bill. And I gotta buy groceries. Okay. I can't... it's gonna be 3 or 4 weeks before my unemployment checks start rolling in. And that government bailout, that's not gonna cut it. I got my check like everybody else in December, and I already spent it on Christmas presents for my nephews and nieces. So that money's gone. I did the unthinkable. I had no choice. I sold my Switch and all my Switch games for cash. Not credit, cash. And I paid my bills. And then I sold my house. And I moved into a house with another trans woman in Dallas, Texas, to get out of where I was at because it was a hostile situation. Because now I'm out and transitioning in my family. Well, let's just say they weren't welcoming. And I had to make a quick exit. Now, I still had my PS4 and my PS3. I wasn't going to sell those because I had over 100 games on the PS3. Digital games that are tied to my console that I can't sell. And I've got Minecraft on the PS4 now, so I'm not giving that up. But I sold everything else. I had rebought a Super Nintendo and an NES and a Genesis and a Sega CD and a 32X and a GameCube up to this point, and even a Wii. And I was rebuilding my collection up to this point because I was a television producer. I owned my own house. My car was paid for. My rent was only $250 a month. Not very much. My power bill was about $85 a month. So I was making good money as a television producer. And I was blowing it all on video games. But I lost my job. And my income is gone. So I had no choice but to sell everything, sell the house, and hit the road. I was fortunate to avoid COVID for a good long while. But I got over the age of 40. I had the bad foot from an injury. I had been developing neuropathy, which was getting worse over time. I developed gastroparesis, which was not pleasant, by the way, and I got GERD to go along with it because they're codependent. But I'm still struggling. I'm hurting, I'm aching, I'm throwing up all the time, but I'm still looking for jobs, and I'm still trying to save up money to buy another Switch again because I still want to get back into the Switch. I've exhausted all of my options on the PlayStation 4. Every game that I want to own on it, except for like 1 or 2 games I don't own, I already own. Because I've had it since launch, basically, and I've been building up a collection of digital titles that I can't sell, unfortunately. But every once in a while, I'll get a little extra money. Or most of my games were purchased back when I had a job, remember I said that. Or over the years where I kept having jobs. But then last year something happened. I started to get sick. We haven't identified what it is yet. There's a problem with my liver. There's a problem with my digestive system. I have a type of colitis we haven't identified yet, so I got to do more surgery and more tests. They found out that I have arthritis, and then earlier this year I got COVID, and that opened the floodgates, and all of my health issues just started piling up. I had carpal tunnel, which I had to have surgery, which I've showed the pictures of what my arm looked like. It's healing now, but it's still... This is what it looks like 6 weeks after the surgery. I still have carpal tunnel here. I still have to have that surgery on this arm. I'm not done yet. I have to go in for an ultrasound here in 3 or 4 weeks, I guess. They're still trying to figure out what specific infection I have in my digestive system. It's a type of colitis, but they haven't narrowed it down. My liver, not looking good. In fact, my liver's looking bad enough that, well, let's just say I'm looking at my exit strategy. And things are not okay right now. So, I love Nintendo. They used to give me joy once upon a time. I'll probably never have the money to get a Switch 2, and it's looking like I'm not going to live long enough. Maybe. I'm not dying yet, but it's we can see the tunnel. I'm not ready to go through the tunnel, but it's in sight. And so I'm probably going to be focused on other things for the time being. I'm still going to play video games. I've got my PS2, my PS3, my PS4. I've got my laptop. I've got my GBA. It's all I got. I'm still going to make YouTube videos from time to time, but I've got arthritis. I've got neuropathy. I got a crack in my foot. I've got carpal tunnel in this arm, and this one is a mess because it's still healing from the surgery. And I've got colitis, and we don't know what's going on with my liver, and I've got gastroparesis and gastritis. And I had GERD. I'm not healthy right now. My body has taken a hit. And so, I've officially been declared disabled, and I'm going through the process of getting SSI disability. I haven't made it through the paperwork yet and gotten everything approved. All the ducks are in a row, the dominoes are lined up. We're just waiting for the green light. I have a couple more steps that I have to go through, and if everything goes well, I'll get my disability, and I'll be able to live a nice, quiet, mellow, low-income life for however long the Medicaid lasts. Assuming the student loans don't siphon all of my SSI when I get it, because that's a real threat I'm terrified of right now because we have a douchebag in the White House and a bunch of Nazis in the Congress. And so I'm a little scared about that. But I'm not giving up. I'm still going to play Nintendo games on my laptop. mostly NES and SNES because that's all this piece of shit can handle. And then whatever I can pick up on the GBA for pennies. If I come across something at a Goodwill that's like, it's $2, and I'm like, alright, I'll sell a trash bag of pop cans to the recycle center and see if I can get a couple bucks to buy a game. That's all I have right now, which I haven't been doing that much because recycling doesn't really pay all that much. I'm going to do a full video follow-up to this one that's going to get into all of this health stuff at the front of the video, and what my prospects are looking like. If you made it, it's almost a 3-hour video. If you're still watching, thank you. I do have a Patreon, and I do have, other ways to support me financially if you want to help me with medical expenses, or groceries, or pain meds. But I apologize, I haven't been producing enough content or keeping up my end of the Patreon, because I'm sick. Like, legit, real sick. And unfortunately, I'm going to be 43 in a few days. I'm probably not getting better. Things are probably going to get worse long before they get better, if ever. Now, I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic that they can't cure the gastroparesis. They can't cure the colitis. They can't cure the neuropathy or the arthritis. Those are things I'm just going to have to live with for the rest of my life, however long that is. The liver situation, we're just going to have to wait and see how that plays out. You can live with arthritis. You can live with colitis. You can live with gastroparesis and neuropathy. But you can't live without a liver. So, this is where my mental energy is right now. Focused on keeping tabs with all my doctors, trying to narrow down what's wrong with my liver so we can figure out how to fix it. I do not drink alcohol. Ever. I do not smoke weed. I smoke tobacco, but that doesn't really affect your liver at all. My lungs? Maybe. But I don't know why my liver is fucked up. I don't know what fucked up my liver. Because I don't drink alcohol, and I'm not a doctor. I don't know what else can fuck up a liver. So I don't know what's going on. But the problem I'm having with my liver is not okay. And the possible treatments, some of them are going to be rough. Some of them are going to be like, alright, let's just do what we got to do. Others, well, let's just say if that happens, I don't know if I'm going to make it. Because, I've got everything piled on top of me right now. I've already been approved for Medicaid disability, so I get assistance with, some stuff. We're still negotiating with the Medicaid people to figure out what specific services I can get that they'll pay for. And I'm working with my case manager to figure that out. But I am more or less confined to this chair at this point. I can walk, but it's exceptionally painful to do so because of the arthritis, the neuropathy, and the bone in my curved feet. I weigh 265 pounds, putting a lot of weight on a lot of sensitive tissue. So I do walk with a cane. So I'm at the point now where, my birthday's coming up. It would be awesome. Just fantastic if someone sent me a Switch. Or a Switch 2. I don't need a Switch 2. Or a GameCube. Or a Nintendo DS. I'm not asking for that. I'm just putting it out there. It would be awesome if someone could do that. But I'm at the point now where I'm focusing all of my energy on just trying to stay alive. And trying to heal. And y'all, this last 6 months have been incredibly hard for me. Incredibly hard. Yeah, I know. Quit smoking. Hey, you know what? I got CPTSD, BPD, and bipolar, among other mental health issues. I know it's bad for my health, and it's probably going to kill me eventually. But so would suicide, YouTube, by bipolar. And I'm transgender and bipolar, living in southern Idaho. I'm already at risk of, without the health issues, just mental health, I'm at risk. So, I'm smoking because it helps relax me. Okay? And I've explained this to my mental health professionals and my doctors, and it is complicating things, but they're working within that framework. And if I could quit, I would. But I really don't want to, because the bipolar, mania, depression stuff, PTSD, anxiety, panic attacks, I don't have the energy to go through that. So I don't know, whatever. I'm not the smartest person. I bought a Sega Saturn. We've established I'm an idiot. Stay cool.